Welcome to part 2 of our fairy tale deep dive. I'm glad you all enjoyed the first part so much. I really appreciate all the kindness that you guys have shown over there. If you click this one first, I'll have the link to part 1 in the description and in the cards. So far we've covered a few major arcs: Deliora, Phantom Lord, the Tower of Heaven, and the Battle for Fairy Tale. Importantly, we've also talked a lot about the theme of family, specifically in relation to Mashima, who lost his father at a very young age, and how we see that dynamic being explored through Natsu and Igneal, as well as through many other parent-child dynamics in the story. As I mentioned last time, this is where the story pivots just a little bit. We still see that theme of family throughout the story, but Mashima also begins to explore other major themes as well. As for this video, we're going to be covering another 120 chapters, bringing us to the time skip. So do the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, leave a comment if you're enjoying, and consider supporting the channel by becoming a member or donating on Patreon, like all of these lovely people. With that said, let's get back into things with the Oracion Seis arc. Last time, Lucy went to protect her father by taking on the Naked Mummy Guild. However, this has consequences. As it turns out, Naked Mummy is the guild that Zato belongs to. You remember Zato, he made fun of Laxus very briefly and then got booty blasted. Thanks to Lucy stopping their robbery, Zato and his partner Gato are now unable to pay off the Dark Guild, Oracion Seis, who is effectively running a Dark Guild pyramid scheme. Anyways, on a lighter note, the gang takes a job working at Yajima's fan service bar. Lucy and Urza are dressed as maids, Gray is wearing just his underwear and a bow tie, and Natsu is eating the customers' food. It's a fantastic way to decompress after the very heavy arcs we've just gone through. Once the shift is done, everyone talks to Yajima about the council's role in the Tower of Heaven, and while the old man feels terrible, everyone else is thankful for him being the last holdout against the Etherion attack. Either way, apparently he stepped out of politics to open a restaurant after all that happened. What this means on a practical level though for Fairy Tail is that the way they interact with the council needs to change. Prior to this, there were 9 members, 3 of which, Ultear, Jellal, and Yajima, were playing defense for Fairy Tail pretty often. Now, no one is inherently on their side in any conflict. Meanwhile, yet another Dark Guild is plotting things behind the scenes. We learn that Ultear is a member of the Dark Guild Grimoire Heart, and working for a man named Hades. They plan to allow Oracion Seis to run rampant in hopes of them drawing the attention of Fairy Tail and potentially having each group wipe each other out. While they do that, Grimoire Heart will continue to work on unsealing Zeref. The Dark Guilds have actually become such an issue as of late that the proper ones need to keep track of them. In particular, there are 4 major Dark Guilds. Raventail, the guild belonging to Makarov's son, is unique in that it is completely independent. However, the other 3, the Oracion Seis, Grimoire Heart, and Tartaros guilds all work together, forming the Balam Alliance to ensure that they keep out of each other's way while still holding enough power to do whatever they want. In doing so, they also made a group which no other Dark Guild could oppose, and so each of them has a collection of smaller guilds working under them who swear their allegiance in exchange for not being wiped out themselves. Notably, of the 4 major Dark Guilds, we have been introduced to 3 of them, though Tartaros is a complete mystery for now. In response to the Balam Alliance, the proper guilds also form their own alliance consisting of Fairy Tail, Blue Pegasus, Lamia Scales, and Kate Shelter. Because of Oracion Seis making open moves recently though, each of these guilds is going to send a few members to combine their strength and take them down, which is kinda crazy, because as the name suggests, the Oracion Seis only have 6 members. But naturally, Fairy Tail's contribution is going to be Natsu, Gray, Lucy, Urza, and Happy. They all head out to the Blue Pegasus Guild and meet with their allies. Blue Pegasus is going to be giving the members Hibiki, Eve, and Ren. As far as most of the members in Blue Pegasus, they kind of only have one personality. They're literally just fuckboy sims. I think the idea is like they're hosts at a host club, and like, it's fine, but I've never been super drawn to any of them in any real way. I get that I'm not their target audience, but I just kind of find them boring and one-dimensional. Now, someone I do love is Ichiya. I don't even know where to start. He is 4'2" of pure machismo and confidence. We see him here rocking a tuxedo, a flowery undershirt, a rose buttonniere, a utility belt, rolled up dress pants that reveal the hairiest legs in the world, a cat-like smile, 5 o'clock shadow, and a jawline that could cut diamonds. He is absolutely hideous, but every part of him genuinely believes that he is the image of sexiness. And you know what? That's half the battle. He is a human stun lock that completely takes hold of you every time he's in a scene. 10 out of 10. Absolutely hate how much I love him. Secondly, we've seen Urza deal with monsters, evil wizards, and everything else the world can throw at her, but Ichiya terrifies her despite her completely respecting him as a wizard. We even see a fight break out between Natsu, Gray, and the Blue Pegasus boys, which Urza stops because, pointless violence between allies. And then Ichiya shows up and she punches him across the room, completely cutting the wind out of any point she just had. Luckily, Lamia Scale arrives and Ichiya is caught by Leon. Along with him, we have Sherry and one of the 10 wizard saints, Jura. And fitting into his position, Jura looks like a beast. He's decked out in this crocodile head hat and matching armbands, as well as clothes almost resembling an Egyptian priest. Like, the dude is intimidating. And that just leaves the Kate Shelter Guild, who is only going to be sending a single person. So what kind of badass must they be? It's obviously going to be this clumsy little girl who immediately trips on the rug. This is Wendy. Like Natsu's design, everything about Wendy leans into the theme of her magic's element, the wind. She has socks that branch back into feathers similar to the sandals of Hermes in Greek myth. Her armbands do the same, giving her a look like she has tiny wings. She has long hair that can be caught in the wind, and her dress looks like a breeze passing over water. Even her being so young is in line with the idea of a spring breeze. It's new, refreshing, the start of something new. And of course, Wendy literally sounds like windy. Like Natsu, Wendy is also accompanied by her own talking cat, Carla. And Happy immediately falls in love, even telling Lucy to go and give Carla a fish for him. And they say chivalry's dead. As for their personalities, Wendy is awkward, anxious, and believes herself to be useless in battle. However, she is fairly confident in her support magic. And Carla is pretty uptight. She's completely focused on what is best for Wendy and can be brutally honest about that. On top of which, anything that doesn't benefit Wendy is pretty quickly ignored by her. When Natsu meets Wendy, he is completely convinced that he knows her from somewhere, but he can't remember how. Which brings us back to the conversation between Igneal and Grandini, where Grandini mentions how she believed Natsu would meet Wendy soon, and that she hoped that they would become good friends this time. We're laying some serious foundation to the idea of them having met in the past, despite neither of them having any memory of that. Gee, I wonder if that's going to come up at all. Anyway, Ichiya explains that there's a magic called Nirvana that has been sealed away and that the Oracion Seis is trying to get a hold of. The Good Guild Alliance has 12 members, which will be headed to deal with the 6 in the Oracion Seis, which should give them an advantage. But again, these 6 are strong enough to put them above almost every other Dark Guild. And we get a quick look at them here. We have Cobra, a wizard who controls snakes, Racer, a wizard with speed magic, Hot Eye, Angel, Midnight, and their leader, Brain. Each of them has a fairly unique design, which we can talk about more as they become relevant, though they are pretty hit or miss in my opinion. Now, along with our 12 wizards, we also have Christina, a Pegasus-shaped airship that can launch devastating attacks on the enemies once they find them. So Natsu gets excited and runs ahead, and everyone but Ichiya and Jura follow him because they all share a single brain cell. Ichiya then asks Jura how he compares to Makarov since they're both wizard saints, and Jura tells him that they aren't comparable at all. The title is actually given by the Magic Council based on a range of reasons, and among the 10 he considers himself to be by far the weakest, which is kind of disappointing because it would be cool to see one of the stronger wizard saints in action again. But then something unexpected happens. Suddenly, Ichiya attacks Jura and transforms into 2 little pixies controlled by Angel of the Oracion Seis. Despite how over the top her clothes are, her design's actually fairly simple. It's an entire dress made up of feathers, wings, and a hair loop that looks like a halo. And this is going to be a theme with a majority of the 6. They each have their codename, and their entire design purely reflects that without too much else going on. We've kind of given up any sense of subtlety when it comes to the Oracion Seis, and instead we're just kind of beating the hell out of one joke or one reference. As for her powers, all we know about her right now is that she has these little dudes who can transform into other people and mimic their mannerisms and thoughts. We can also extrapolate a little bit, as just about every example of someone fighting with a weird little guy has been a celestial wizard so far. But with that, Jura and Ichia are down, and our 12 wizards have already been reduced by 2 of their strongest fighters before the battle even begins. But hey, at least they have Christina. So anyways, then Christina blows up mid-flight as the remaining members come face to face with the Oracion Seis in the forest. And we are not off to a good start. Natsu and Gray rush forward, only for Racer to catch them off guard with his speed before attacking all 3 of the Pegasus host boys. Angel creates a copy of Lucy, Hot Eye liquefies the ground below Sherry and Leon, Cobra holds off Urza and even poisons her with a snake. It is literally only a matter of seconds and our entire task force is wiped out. Not only that, but it happened without Brain or Midnight even lifting a finger. In fact, Midnight is straight up asleep. Once the battle is over, Brain goes to cast Dark Rondo to finish the job, but then he sees Wendy and freezes in place, much to the disappointment of his talking staff. Brain calls Wendy the Priestess of the Sky and captures her with his magic, accidentally grabbing Happy along with her. With her now out of the way, he is free to attack, but Jura has recovered and arrives just in time to defend everyone. However, when the dust settles, all of the Oracion Seis have vanished. Listen, Fairy Tail has gotten some beatings in the series, but this was a beating. It was only thanks to Ichia waking up and using his magic enough to heal Jura enough to get him involved that we survived at all. Luckily, Ichia's magic is smell-based, so when everyone else catches a whiff of his manly parfum, they're all back on their feet, which is kinda convenient, but it is what it is. Notably, like Elfman, Ichia is all about being manly, and as an extension of that, he pretty much only thinks about sex according to the little guys who turned into him, and as an extension, his magic revolves around pheromones. For some reason though, his parfum doesn't work on Urza, so the girl takes Lucy's belt, uses it as a tourniquet, and asks the others to cut off her arm before Cobra's venom can continue to spread. Like, zero hesitation. She didn't even look for another option, and that's so badass for no reason. Leon, who has a bit of trouble with empathy, is like, alright, no problem, let me chop. And he has to be stopped by Gray before he actually cuts off Urza's arm. Luckily, Carla explains that Wendy has healing magic and she should be able to save Urza. This is because she knows healing magic as an extension of being the Sky Dragon Slayer. And that is just one more piece to the Dragon Slayer puzzle. Natsu and Gajiel are supposedly over 80 years old. Igniel and Grandini are talking about Natsu and Wendy having met each other in the past. And now, healing magic that is supposed to have been lost to time. Again, we are continuing to tie these 3 characters to the past for some unknown reason. As for the situation at hand though, we have an injured Jura and Ichia back on the team, but we lost Urza in exchange. We catch up with the Oracion Seis as they bring Wendy back to their hideout, and Brain explains that she can use her healing magic to revive him, the classic anime him. That said, we never learn about how Brain knows who Wendy is, how she's connected to this mystery character, or what her magic is. He just does know, and that's all there is to it. Which is definitely a bit weird and seems like Mashima just straight up forgot to show us how those dots are connected. Seriously, if I'm missing something, just let me know in the comments, but it seems like a bit of a plot hole to me. So, Brain sends Racer to fetch whoever that person is, while Cobra, Hot Eye, and Angel continue to search for Nirvana. Though apparently if the mystery man is revived, they won't even need Nirvana anyways. In the meantime, Brain and Midnight will watch over Wendy. Well, kinda. Midnight is still asleep, so I guess it's just Brain keeping watch. As for the good guys, Lucy and Hibiki stay with Urza, meaning there are 4 members of the Oracion Seis in the wild and 8 members from our side. We're still working with 2-to-1 odds, but a lot of the key players are not involved, and even with everyone involved the last time, we didn't do so well. Natsu is traveling with Gray and Carla, and the cat explains that she and Wendy signed up for the mission specifically in hopes of meeting another Dragon Slayer because 7 years ago, her dragon, Grandini, had completely vanished, and maybe Natsu knows where they are. Of course he doesn't, and that means that Wendy is the newest member of the Lost Dragon Club. This group ends up coming across the Naked Mummy Guild led by Gato and Zato, and while Carla is nervous about this, Natsu and Gray are just excited to fight again. But Naked Mummy isn't the only guild working for the Oracion Seis. Black Unicorn surrounds Eve and Ren, another guild ambushes Jura, Sherry, and Leon, and Ichia is caught out on his own. So, while the numbers were 2-1, it actually works out more like 10-1 the other way. Meanwhile, unconventionally for a shonen, we find out who him was pretty much immediately. Racer returns with a chained-up, cross-shaped sarcophagus, and as it opens, we see that Jellal is inside. After being bathed in ether nano, he fell into a coma, and now his body is crumbling apart, which I guess confirms Urza's theory that Jellal was actually the one who saved her from the Etherion. More interesting than that though, Wendy apparently owes Jellal her life. Happy tries to convince her not to revive him by explaining all the terrible things he did to Urza, but she refuses to believe him as he apparently saved her and she loved him. She is completely convinced that someone else had to be manipulating him when he did all those awful things, which I guess is true. As for the others, nearly everyone else, with the exception of Ichia, managed to defeat the Dark Guild opponents, and Natsu and Gray start closing in on Wendy and Happy. Racer is sent out to stop them, but Natsu and Carla dive past him while Gray stops Racer from chasing after them. However, by the time Natsu arrives, Jellal has already been revived. Our boy goes in to take him out once again, and we are immediately reminded of the difference that eating ether nano made as Natsu gets blown away in a single attack. But it isn't going as Brain wanted either, as the next moment Jellal sends him plummeting into the earth, and with that, he leaves without causing any more harm. Of course, Natsu still wants to fight him, but Carla reminds him that Urza is out in the forest dying and that should probably take priority. So he can either chase Jellal and get his ass beat again, or we can bring Wendy to save his friend, and luckily, that's the path that we go with here. Meanwhile, Brain is more than a little bit upset that Jellal betrayed him and believes that he is trying to take Nirvana for himself. And Brain looks truly psychotic here just before he screams out to Cobra to find Jellal. Which I guess is a good time to mention, Cobra hears really good, I guess. So even though he's really far away, he still hears the instructions loud and clear. He isn't the only one of the Seis taking action though. Racer is overwhelming Gray in their fight with his speed. Speaking of Racer, like I said with Angel, these guys all have very basic designs. In his case, he has racing glasses, a mohawk, and long eyebrows that look like lightning. Fitting to his name, he also has a racing jacket, and the sponsor labels on it are all the Balam Alliance, Oracion Seis, Grimoire Hearts, and Tartaros. These are all kind of fun details, but unfortunately they were removed in the anime. Anyways, he sees Natsu and Wendy flying overhead and tries to leave the battle with Gray, but Gray basically splits the entire forest in half with a wall of ice. It's an impressive show that uses up a ton of his magic, but it manages to stop Racer from chasing Natsu's group, taunting him by saying no matter how much he tries or how fast he moves, he's always going to be looking at the fairy's tail. Kind of a cheesy way to saying you'll always be behind us, but it works. After Natsu escapes, he is contacted by Hibiki from Blue Pegasus. The guy actually has some very useful magic. It's called Magic Archive. It basically allows him to telepathically connect with anyone in a pretty significant range, as well as make holographic projections of maps, people's locations, current stamina levels, and store information as well. It's basically the perfect tactician magic. Using this, he sends Natsu a map that shows him exactly how to get back to Urza as quickly as possible. As for Gray's fight, Racer is fast enough to appear behind Gray every time he turns around. But rather than using that speed to straight up kill Gray, Racer initiates the Dead Grand Prix. And what's the best way to explain this? So you know that Yu-Gi-Oh series where they said, what if we did Yu-Gi-Oh on motorcycles? Well, that's the Dead Grand Prix. Racer summons a couple of wizard bikes, which work the same way as Urza's car and take magic for fuel. And from there, it's Gray chasing Racer while casting ice magic, as Racer defends himself by creating tires and throwing them back at Gray. I gotta say, we've seen some weird magic in Fairy Tail so far, but Racer has by far the weirdest. Super speed, and the ability to summon motorcycle parts. It's so specific and it's so much of a stretch to make it work. As they ride, they cross paths with Leon, who hops on Gray's bike, essentially allowing Gray to focus on driving while Leon plays offense. Also, for Leon's part, he has started using two-handed maker magic just as Ur had taught them. He isn't trying to be fancy with one-handed spells, he has returned back to basics. He not only knows that he hasn't surpassed Ur, he is actively trying to reflect on her lessons. This, of course, in combination with him joining Lamia Scales and allowing himself to work with Gray here, he is nowhere near as cold or distant as he used to be, and it's a very simple and effective way of showing his growth. Oh, and also Sherry is here, but like she might as well not be if we're being honest. Anyways, Leon manages to land an attack that breaks Racer's bike, and Racer uses his speed to return the favor. It turns out he is faster without it, which leaves me wondering why he even summoned the bike to begin with. With all three of the wizards now on foot, Racer takes the advantage as he can easily dodge their spells. However, Leon believes he has found Racer's weakness. Leon whispers his plan into Gray's ear before sealing him in ice, saying that he doesn't need him anymore. Then Sherry finally gets involved, only to be taken out in a single hit, which is great. So, what is this great plan Leon has? Well, he notices that while Racer is very fast, he doesn't exactly hit very hard, nor does he have any real versatility in his attacks. He can either run, punch, or make tires. So Leon's big move is Ice Make Hedgehog. That's it. He covers his back in spikes, assuming that stops everything Racer can do. And then Leon gets blasted. Racer knocks him around and then reveals his literal secret weapon, a knife. It's just a knife, which, okay, bud. But as it turns out, Leon had discovered the actual secret to Racer's magic. He saw birds flying overhead at incredible speed and realized that Racer wasn't making himself fast, he just slows everyone else in the area down. So while they thought Leon was leading Racer away from Gray, and now that he was far enough away to be out of range, he could launch an ice arrow at full speed and take Racer out. But like, quick question about Racer here, if he isn't really fast, why is he the one who's always sent to go get things? Like, Brain sends him to get Jellal's sarcophagus, which is supposedly far away, and if he has super speed that makes sense, but he doesn't, which means he was basically some guy just jogging to get Jellal. Sure, if everything he needs to get done is in range, it'll feel like he's doing it quick, but he just isn't. The same amount of time for the world will still pass, and it'll only feel shorter for the people in range, and I think that's so goddamn funny.
Yeah, I can speak to that. When you're going super fast, it looks really quick from the outside, but on the inside, you're just walking. You're just moving normal pace.
Anyways, that said, we're like 140 chapters in, and I think this is the first magic I have any real problem with so far, so it's pretty fair. I also want to talk about the moment of Gray firing his bow. Racer is like, but he's far, so he'll never hit me. And Leon is like, nah bro, he absolutely can, because no matter what, when they try to do something, fairy tale wizards put their heart into it, and that makes them the strongest. It's a small line that is super cheesy, but at the same time it shows real appreciation for Gray and for fairy tale as a whole, which is still cool coming from Leon of all people. The moment is a little bit spoiled as Racer gets back to his feet, shows he's wearing an explosive vest, and tries to grab Gray, so instead Leon jumps in the way, gets pulled off of a cliff, and quickly erupts in a massive explosion. Now that Racer is actually defeated, one of Brain's tattoos fades away and Midnight wakes up for the first time. As it turns out, they are Brain's son, which is a plot twist that I don't think really changes anything here. Anyways, Gray is convinced that Leon wouldn't have died in that attack, which this is fairy tale, so that's a safe bet. However, when it comes to explosions like that, if anyone has to tank them, I would want someone like Gray, Leon, or Urza to be the one doing that because their magic is so defensive. Either way, we're on to Jura's fight. Now, Jura is in an interesting situation because on the one hand, he is a wizard saint, and that's fucking cool. On the other hand, he definitely feels just like some guy. His opponent will be Hot Eye, the dude who can liquefy Earth. Hot Eye is the newest member to the Characters from N64 Graphics Club, which is strictly a set of characters that I do not like the designs of. Interestingly enough, though, in many ways, Hot Eye is like the anti-Jura. They both have these vaguely religious clothing, one more Catholic while the other is kind of Egyptian-esque. They both use earth manipulating magic, with Hot Eye softening it and Jura hardening it. And while Jura is humble and selfless, Hot Eye is super proud and obsessed with making himself rich. But I do really like a line from Jura here. Hot-Eye asks him which form of magic is better between them, and Jura responds, "There is no greater or lesser magic, the one with the highest ideals always wins." And that's pretty much been my understanding of magic in Fairy Tail, and especially in the demonstration of its power of friendship trope. It doesn't really matter what kind of magic you're using, what matters is the emotions and the heart that's behind that magic. So it's cool to see it kind of laid out like this from him. As their fight starts, Cobra catches up with Jellal, though he's kind of confused as he's unable to hear the voice of Jallal's heart. He follows him to this glowing underground tree that is covered in chains, and in an instant, Jellal blows it up in a pillar of magical energy. Meanwhile, Natsu's group finally makes it back to Urza, and Wendy manages to heal her pretty quickly. The poison is gone, but she'll still be out for a little bit. That said, Carla asks that Wendy not use her sky magic anymore as it takes a lot of energy for her to use it. So between Jellal and Urza, she is also kind of out of the picture for now. Their celebration is quickly brought to an end though as a pillar of black light from Jallal's attack on the tree emerges and a great tower grows from beneath it. Natsu rushes towards the tower knowing that he can't let Urza and Jellal meet or she will be hurt by him again, but as he calls out that that is where Jellal is, Urza's eyes open. Now this tower begins absorbing the energy from the surrounding land and jams Hibiki's communications. On top of that, despite Wendy saying that it would be a while until she wakes up, Urza vanishes in the next moment and Wendy is completely racked by guilt for reviving Jellal and allowing him to find Nirvana. Seeing her begin to spiral, Hibiki knocks her unconscious and explains that Nirvana is a magic that turns light into darkness, but this is only the first stage. In a practical sense, it means that those on the edge of good and evil will switch sides, so Wendy experiencing guilt will make her feel like a bad person, which would ultimately result in her being turned evil, which is why he needed to knock her out. It's kind of an interesting magic, very different from what we've seen so far. But you know who else is dealing with negative feelings? Sherry. She thinks she just saw Leon die, and she is filled with anger and hatred, blaming Gray for his death. Because of this, she attacks him while he is still worn out from the last fight, chokes him out with old Treebeard over here, and vows to continue avenging him by taking out the other members of Fairy Tail. But it isn't just our side that's changing though. Hot-Eye swaps to a personality that realizes he lost himself, obsessing over money so that he could find his long-lost brother. And now he's this overly sweet, loving man who begins hugging Jura rather than fighting him. And I really like that we're seeing this affect both groups though. I mean, very few people are evil purely for the sake of being evil, right? And in a vast majority of cases, they are doing what they truly believe is right, or what will lead to a better future, often feeling like violence is the last option. And this is also in line with the title of Nirvana. Reaching Nirvana means surpassing earthly desires and reaching a state of perfect peace. It is balance, accepting the good and the bad within yourself, so as a weapon, it only affects those who are off balance one way or the other, which could be just about everyone, but weapon is definitely the right word for this as it isn't just some random force. Nirvana can actually be harnessed and used to target specific places. Say, for example, a guild, where their members would all begin to attack each other for no reason. As a result, this is a power which could bring an end to all the good guilds if it fell into the hands of the Balam Alliance. As Natsu continues to rush to the tower, he finds Gray passed out in the water, but as he approaches, it turned out that Gray set a trap, pulling ropes which raise a raft and trap Natsu on a moving vehicle. The perfect maneuver. Luckily, Lucy arrives to protect him from Gray's attack, but unluckily that means that Lucy has to compete with Gray. But hey, you might be thinking, we just saw Sherry take Gray out, and this guy is talking pretty weirdly. Like when he freezes Happy, he says Happy can fly and carry people, he's no use in battle, information complete. That's not a very Gray thing to say. Then he starts analyzing how Gray sees Lucy, and yeah man, it's clearly the girl who copies other people and steals information. Hibiki is actually the first one to notice, but because the real Gray doesn't know anything about this character, they turn their focus to Lucy instead. And like, this is such a cool power. The ability to immediately swap into anyone and to gain their frame of reference, everything they know about their allies or their plans in general, like that is immensely powerful. If Hibiki had the ultimate tactician ability, this might be the ultimate espionage ability. And considering how long this power will be in the series, it is insane how few times we actually get to see it used to its full potential. Anyways, they turn into Lucy, and what does Lucy know about Hibiki that would deal with him immediately? That's right, she flashes him. And like, yes, this is pretty stupid, but it also got me laughing pretty hard. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Especially because you have Sagittarius right next to him and even the horse head is reacting to it. Then there's Natsu on the raft saying it's rocking and Hibiki's just like, yep, it sure is. It's been a while since we've had some fan service. We'll give this one to Mashima. Also, just super irrelevant detail, Lucy's whip harness has the letters HK on it, which stands for Heart Cruise, the same company that makes Urza's armor, and like, that's such like a small thing to include. It genuinely doesn't matter at all, but it's just these little splashes of flavor and keeping the world connected that Mashima includes here and there that I really appreciate, and I don't really see many people talking about it. Anyways, Clone Lucy has access to all of real Lucy's magic, which means she can do things like order Sagittarius to shoot Hibiki. That also means that we are continuing the trend of putting Lucy in a position where she needs to outwit her opponent while having her access to celestial spirits taken away. And I'm honestly in love with how Mashima treats her fights when he does them well like this. Carla senses that there is danger, so she takes Wendy away, and at the same time, Lucy forces Sagittarius' gate closed so that he can't be used against her. But as she does this, the clone just reopens it and summons it to fight for her instead. Then, out of pure arrogance, Angel appears, dissolving her clone of Lucy and unsummoning Sagittarius, completely throwing away any control of the battlefield that she had. This is purely a pride thing because Angel is a celestial wizard as well, and the clones that she makes are through the celestial spirit, Gemini. So, she wants to outdo Lucy to prove that she is the better wizard. Not only that, but she wants to put a wager on their fight where whoever wins takes all of the loser's keys. And this is actually such a cool fight. Lucy summons Aquarius and Angel summons Scorpio, who it turns out is Aquarius's boyfriend, and she is a total simp for this man. And why wouldn't she be? Look at this dude's design. He has this really cool red and white color scheme going on with his hair and clothes. He has this mechanical scorpion tail equipped with a machine gun. Also on his tail is the word Antares, which is the brightest star in the Scorpius constellation, and is also called the Heart of the Scorpion. It's not a super intricate design, but it has just enough going on that it's immediately interesting, and it has a couple of smaller details which add a lot of flavor that flesh out the character. It's pretty fantastic in my opinion. That said, we don't get to see what he can really do, as once he and Aquarius are face to face, they just leave and go on a date. So Lucy's strongest spirit is gone, but what about her best all-arounder? Leo comes out on her side and Angel summons Ares in response. As you might expect, Loki and Lucy don't exactly want to fight Ares. However, Hibiki also recognizes her as Karen's spirit. Turns out she was his girlfriend, I think. It was pretty implied that she was a lot of dudes' girlfriends, so it's kind of hard to tell. Regardless, the reason that Angel has Ares is because she is the one who killed Karen. Lucy's about to close Loki's gate, but he grabs her hand and stops her from doing it. Both he and Ares feel the same way here. While they are friends and have been for a long time, they have different owners now, and their pride as celestial spirits comes down to being able to be of use to those new owners. So while they don't want to fight, they also don't want to stand down. Not only that, but Loki is more than a little excited to take down the wizard who killed Karen. Now, unlike Lucy, Angel is pretty excited to see them fight, but quickly realizes that while Loki was meant for battle, Ares isn't. So she summons a celestial spirit called Calum and fires a blast through both spirits, taking them out on the spot. As Loki fades away, he asks for Lucy's forgiveness, but while Ares fades away, she just thinks about how happy she is that Loki found a good owner. We immediately love Ares in this house. Now, Angel is high on her own shit, bragging about how she just summoned two spirits at the same time and how Loki is off the board. But Lucy is disgusted to see a celestial wizard so ruthlessly attacking their own spirits. She summons Taurus, but Gemini turns into Lucy, squeezes her chest to distract the bull, and then uses Calum as a sword to take him out in an instant. By now, Lucy has summoned Taurus, Sagittarius, Aquarius, and Loki. She is completely out of fuel, meaning Gemini is free to stomp her into the river. When she frees herself, she demands that Ares be released, begging Angel to let her be with Loki, offering anything but her keys to make that happen. And Angel actually agrees. She will release Ares in exchange for Lucy's life. Gemini goes in for the kill, but as she does, all of Lucy's thoughts and memories begin rushing through her mind. This is the downside of being a perfect copy, thoughts and all. Gemini sees how much Lucy genuinely cares for the celestial spirits, unlike Angel, and because of this difference, Gemini refuses to kill Lucy. And watching all of that take place affects Hibiki's emotions so much that he falls to nirvana. He walks over to Lucy, grabs her by the neck, and psych! He uses his ability to give Lucy access to hyper magic. And I adore how this is shown with Lucy's chant not appearing in the speech bubble, but being shown behind it. It's like the whole manga is being drawn over the secret to this all-powerful magic. With it, she calls on all 88 of the constellations to use Urano Meteora, the ultimate celestial spirit magic, and what a phenomenal panel. With this, Angel is completely defeated. Well, almost. She manages to her feet for one final attack from Calum, but the spirit bends its attack to miss its target, leaving its controller out of magic as she falls back and wishes she could vanish far away into the sky. Now, while the shot missed Lucy, it untethered Natsu's raft and sends him towards a set of rapids. While she is pretty much tapped out herself, Lucy dives onto the raft to protect him as they go flying over the waterfall. With the defeat of the second member of the Oracion Seis, yet another tattoo fades from Brain's face. Not everything is going our way though. Midnight has made his move and seems to have taken out both Ren and Eve without even breaking a sweat. In fact, he's actively hoping for someone of value to fight. As for Wendy, she is talking to Carla about how she shouldn't have come here to begin with and how reviving Jellal must have been a mistake. Here we find out that after Grandini vanished, she was lost and alone when Jellal found her. He took care of her for about a month until one day he shouted "Anima" and warned Wendy that traveling with him anymore would be dangerous, so she should find some nearby guild and see if they would take her in. Since then, she had heard terrible rumors about him, but even so, it had been nice to see him again. Notably, this doesn't fit with the timeline that we have for Jellal. He was a slave, then he took over the tower, and as far as we know, he never left. And on top of that, he never dressed like this or had this style of equipment. Now that said, we do know another character at this point who has Jellal's face. We saw Mystigan reveal this when he fought against Laxus. All the same though, similar thoughts are going through Urza's mind as well, wondering what kind of face she should make when she sees Jellal again. In her case, it wouldn't be long before she had her answer as a whirl of dust and magic envelops her and she finds herself standing right in front of him. And can I just say, god damn, these are pretty panels. There's so much movement to it, but you just feel the silence coming off the page. Cobra is also watching the whole event unfold, shocked that Urza both survived and made it here unnoticed. But as Urza confronts Jellal, things get much more complicated when he reveals that he has completely forgotten who he is, and the name Urza is all that he remembers. Which begs the question, if a monster wakes up with no memories of who they are, or what they've done, are they still that same monster? Can you hold them accountable for their actions? Urza tries approaching him, but the dude is freaking out. He knows her name, but he doesn't know why at all. He is terrified, and he tells her not to come any closer, so she gives her name and demands that he comes to her. And I love that she doesn't pull any punches in telling him who he is. She says, "Your name is Jellal, and at one time you and I were friends, but you became deranged and desecrated the dead, hurt your friends, went so far as to destroy the council and murder Simon. If you think you can get away with forgetting that, I will stab my sword into your heart and slice it to pieces." It's a moment of real emotion. She's heartbroken to see him. She recognizes that it's a second chance, but she still holds him to the terrible things he's done. Cobra overhears all of this and interrupts them. He says Jellal's missing memories are probably why he couldn't hear his heart, which implies that he really does have amnesia and isn't just trying to pretend. Jellal explains that while he was asleep, he heard someone's voice telling him to take control of Nirvana and warning him that it was very dangerous. So when he woke up, he broke its seal and inserted a square of self-destruction into it. As Nirvana begins to implode, Jellal comments on how Urza's name comes with the feeling of warmth, but also with shame. He can't bring himself to stand before her, so instead, he will free her from whoever this Jellal was before, from all the hatred and the pain that are tied to that name. He will take those feelings with him And as he says that, his own body begins to self-destruct as well, all in hopes of taking the code needed to protect Nirvana with him. This is yet another suicide attempt for the sake of someone else in the series. However, there is something pure about someone with no memories choosing to make that sacrifice in hopes of freeing someone else from their sadness, someone that they only know the name of. That being said, though, that is now already the second sacrifice of the arc, following several arcs which each have their own sacrifices as well. We're kind of getting to the point where we are losing emotional weight because it's happening so often. In fact, let's get a counter going. Gray, Leon, Gray again, Lucy, Simon, Urza, a small moment for each of Juvia and Gajiel, Urza again, Leon again, and Jellal. That is 12 self-sacrificing attempts in 9 arcs, and only 2 of those succeeded, being and Simon. RIP to them, they were real ones. I just think we need a break from them for a bit, you know? Sure, this one is a great moment, but again, we are really harping into this motif. Anyways, Natsu and Lucy finally wake up. They had been saved by Virgo and given clothes from the Celestial Spirit World that look absolutely excellent. That said, Virgo had to force her way through the gate as Lucy's power is still drained from using hyper magic. We have a small moment of Natsu thanking Lucy for protecting him that I really like. And finally, Sherry arrives, immediately tries to attack them, only for Gray to stop her and for Leon to emerge very confused as to why she had him killed off in her mind. Seeing that he is okay, Nirvana leaves Sherry's body and she returns back to normal. In case you're wondering, yes, that is all of the impact she will have in this arc. Now, Urza sees Jellal on the ground and charges over to him, refusing to let him die like this without paying for his crimes. Dying for her is taking the easy way out and denying him a life of carrying that guilt. However, the whole tone of the moment shifts as Brain finally arrives on the battlefield, and he immediately lets us know just how smart he is by telling Cobra to relax. After all, you may know my code name is another word for the mind. Which, alright, cool, bud. More importantly, though, he tells us that he worked for the Ministry of Magical Development, and while he was there, he personally created the Square of Self-Destruction. And with the knowledge that went into making that spell, he negates Nirvana's destruction effortlessly. And I really don't like this. Sure, it's a way to elevate Brain as a character, make them seem more imposing, give them this wealth of knowledge about spells and information, but we're bringing it up at a very convenient time. This has never been mentioned before in any way, shape, or form. He just shows up, he's like, by the way, I know about this stuff, cancel your self-destruction spell, we're taking all the wind out of your sails. We just needed a scene earlier, maybe when introducing the Oracion Seis, where they were like, and their leader, Brain, used to work for the Ministry of Magical Development and has all this knowledge about spells. We just kind of needed something like that, which could have planted the seeds for this earlier and not made it seem like such an ass-pull in this moment. Regardless, Urza charges him, but she is too slow, and Brain summons the true form of Nirvana. Suddenly, gigantic tentacles of stone emerge from the ground and lift the massive weapon far into the air. With this power now in his hands, he can turn guilds built on trust and solidarity against themselves, leaving only dark guilds standing. Urza manages to grab onto the weapon as it rose, holding a ledge with one hand and Jellal with the other. She tells him that he has a duty to stay alive. However, Jellal sees this insurmountable weapon and thinks that it just doesn't even matter anymore. There's nothing they could possibly do to oppose it, but Urza directs him to one of Nirvana's other legs where Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Wendy have managed to pull themselves up. As always, Fairy Tail refuses to back down in the face of adversity, and seeing this, even Leon, Jura, and Hadai are inspired to begin climbing as well. They aren't the only ones stirred by this moment, though. Jellal stares in shock as the woman telling him that he must carry the burden of his crimes also tells him that he should live to see what happens next, because nothing is over yet. Now, the million-dollar question, though, where is Ichiya? Well, our dude is still hogtied to a stick and now stuck on a branch, truly a wizard of power. Not that Natsu has much room to judge here, though, in that he realizes that he is technically on a vehicle, which makes him fall off of the leg, where he is luckily caught by Happy, who again is not a vehicle, he is a friend. Atop Nirvana is a gigantic temple overlooking an ancient city. From here, Brain is able to freely control Nirvana and send it moving forward to get in range to attack his enemies. However, Natsu and Happy arrive to attack, beginning a fight in the air between he and Happy, and Cobra and his flying snake Kubelios, which is such a cool name. And here is about as good a time as any to talk about Cobra's design. Something about him really reminds me of Gajiel. Maybe it's all the studs on his many belts and jackets. He has a lot of maroon and purple motifs to go along with the poison that he uses. He has sharp eyes, snake-like pupils, a flatter nose, and his canine teeth extend a little bit. Basically, he is a snaky boy. And he has a big focus on sound. Specifically, he's able to hear people's hearts and judge their intentions. But on top of that, he can also hear from very far away. All of this comes from snakes being able to hear vibrations, and it all fits pretty well thematically. Of all the Oracion Seis, I'd say that his design is probably the most simple, but also the most effective on hitting the theme without really going too hard into it. Using his abilities, he continuously reads Natsu's moves and stops him from attacking Brain. Luckily, Wendy, who is also a Dragon Slayer and thus also gets motion sickness, hasn't realized that Nirvana is a vehicle yet, so she and Carla land safely. Wendy partially wants to find Jellal here, but more importantly, she wants to prove that there is something that she can do to help, even if the odds are insurmountable. How very fairy tale of her. However, this becomes even more important as she and Carla realize that Nirvana is heading towards her guild, Kate Shelter. Gray and Lucy make it up to the ancient city where they meet up with Jura and Hot Eye, and their former enemy gives them a quick lore dump. This city is where the Nervit clan lived 400 years ago. But when war spread across the world, the Nervit developed a hyper magic which could swap light and darkness, Nirvana. This is kinda cool in that it's really the first bit of ancient world building that we've had in the series outside of mentioning Zeref's name here and there. It's also another reference to hyper magic, which we were just introduced to, though it doesn't come up super often in the series going forward. It's here and there, but it's not as mainstay as this arc might be seeming like it's leading up towards. But as Hot Eye is telling this story, Midnight arrives and begins his attack. It's the first time we really get to see him using his magic in action, and it is devastating. With a swing of his arm, a slice is taken out of an entire block of this ancient city, but luckily Hot Eye liquefies the ground and saves everyone at the last moment. He decides to take on Midnight himself since all the Oracion Seis members are supposed to be roughly the same strength as each other, and while holding off the enemy, he wants all of his new friends to escape. And as they do so, he gives us his real name, Richard. And thank God, because I never want to say or type Hot Eye again. Jesus Christ, it's such an awkward name. It just doesn't feel good. Meanwhile, Cobra is just playing with Natsu. He's reading all of his thoughts and predicting his attacks, even calling them out the moment before Natsu launches them just to taunt him. So Natsu comes up with the idea, no thinking, just attack head on. And once he successfully turns his brain off, he gets ahead, only for Cobra to reveal his true magic and go on the offensive. He doesn't just have magic that allows him to hear people's hearts, he is Cobra, the Poison Dragon Slayer. This marks the 5th Dragon Slayer we've seen in the series, as well as the first to take on truly dragonic features as his hands turn into dragon claws. While he's been toying with Natsu on the defensive, Cobra is a force on the offensive. His own poison allows him to rot anything he manages to touch, while Kubelios can release a poison mist for him to eat and refuel with whenever he needs it. Cobra also gives us a bit of background on Dragon Slayers when Natsu survived a Poison Dragon roar attack. He says the old generation Dragon Slayers really can take it, and he goes on to explain the difference between 1st and 2nd generation Dragon Slayers. Basically, people like Natsu, Gajiel, and Wendy, who were raised by dragons and learned Dragon Slayer magic naturally, are 1st generation. While the 2nd generation, people like Cobra and Laxus, had Lacrima implanted in them to give them access to their abilities. Kinda neat, and it just makes sense that Laxus wouldn't be the only attempt at creating an artificial Dragon Slayer. Their fight continues, the poison slows Natsu and Happy down, and Natsu comes up with a plan to have Happy drop him and think about a massive fire attack that engulfs the sky to take Cobra out. So hearing this plan from his heart, Cobra tries to get ahead of him and tighten the range to make himself more difficult to target. But as he comes in for safety, Natsu devises a new plan. If you remember back to the start of the series, Natsu did a lot of these like goofy in-the-moment knockouts, and this really reminds me of those. He commits to one plan, whether or not it will work, then in the last moment comes up with a brand new one, yelling at the top of his lungs to stun Cobra's sensitive ears as he is already flying down at top speed. Basically, Natsu tricked him into diving as fast as he could into the ground, and that's how he wins the fight. And again, I really appreciate these more thoughtful, creative victories over just the Unga Bunga I am stronger ones. Or it would be. Just like Angel and Racer, Cobra gets back to his feet one more time and tries to surprise attack Natsu. But as he does, Brain shoots him in the back. Cobra reads his heart and hears him think that the Oracion Seis didn't need members who could be beaten by official guild members. As Cobra passes out, he thinks back to a prayer he once had, where he asked to hear the voice of the only friend he ever had, Kubelios. Now, of the 3 members who have gone down, all of them have gotten back up, and all have mentioned a prayer before failing a final attack. That surprise is getting kind of old at this point, but the idea of a prayer is interesting. We are told by Racer that Oracion can mean demon or prayer. They are monsters, but they each have their own wish for a better world or a better life. And I think that's kind of cool thematically when dealing with the idea of the balance of light and dark with Nirvana. Either way, watching one guildmate betray another makes Natsu super angry, but unfortunately he is dealing with both Cobra's poison and motion sickness, so Brain can literally just drag him away without worries. He starts taking him away when he crosses paths with Lucy's group and explains that Natsu will be the first new member for the rebuilt Oracion Seis once his heart is flipped by Nirvana. Jura begins asking Brain why he is targeting Kate Shelter, and when he refuses to answer, Jura sends the dude flying before asking again. Jura's magic actually ends up being pretty crazy. It's like the wildest earthbending you've ever seen, and he ends it with a rock version of Gaara's sand coffin. It takes him literally no time to take Brain out, and when he does, the leader of the Oracion Seis says that everything is in Midnight's hands now. As he passes out, another tattoo is removed, and he mentions someone doing something when the 6 prayers vanish. Speaking of Midnight though, to this point, Richard has been absolutely dunking on him. But out of nowhere, all of his wounds are suddenly healed and he counterattacks, taking Richard out in one shot. 5 prayers are down. On the plus side though, Wendy is able to use her magic to heal Natsu's motion sickness and his poison, so now he is back in the fight. But this is where Carla points out something terrible. Brain is down, there's no set of controls to Nirvana in the King's Hall, and yet the weapon is still moving towards Kate's shelter. Richard then connects to everyone telepathically to let them know that Nirvana has an organic link to Midnight, similar to how Laxus had his Lacrima attack anyone who damaged them. He goes on to tell them where Midnight can be found and warns them that they will need to group up to beat him. However, Richard doesn't have telepathy magic. In reality, it is Brain sending them this message. Everything is going just as he planned, and as Natsu's group goes to check things out, they are met with a giant explosion. It was all a trap, but luckily Jura used his magic to take the entire brunt of the damage himself. He is now completely out of commission, but this sacrifice keeps everyone else in the fight. Meanwhile, it is Urza and Jellal who come across Midnight first, and Midnight wipes the floor with Jellal effortlessly. And as a reminder, we just saw Jellal one-shot Natsu not that long ago. And now it's Urza's turn, but as she swings her sword, the path of her attack twists away. Not only that, but then her armor swirls around her, leaving her immobile. That's because Midnight has reflector magic, something which allows him to bend, twist, or mutilate anything. So when we saw him slice the town earlier, it was just him reflecting the air in a sharp, scythe-like path. On top of that, he can redirect magic or bend light to create illusions. This is the last of the Oracion Seis magic that we have had to see so far, and I gotta say, while the designs of these characters can be pretty hit or miss, almost all of their magic has been pretty interesting actually. I mean, aside from motorcycle magic or whatever. However, it turns out that the Oracion Seis has another member. Brain's staff is a living being and appears to taunt Natsu's group. Natsu himself has the best reaction to this, grabbing him and smacking it on the ground. Meanwhile, everyone else is more concerned with how dumb it is to name a group with 7 members the Oracion Seis. Urza goes into Heaven's Wheel and then sends a flood of swords towards Midnight, only for him to Uno reverse them. And I believe this is the first of many times that we are sexualizing Urza being in pain. Here, it's just some dude being a sadist and getting off to her suffering. But like this ramps up so goddamn fast as we move into later arcs. Luckily, she manages to stand up and attack again, but with Midnight's next move, she is stripped down to just a skirt and left on the floor. So that's cool. Midnight goes on to expand on what Richard was telling us about the Nervit. After making Nirvana to stop wars, they realized it was too dangerous, so they sealed it away. They then formed a guild of only the Nervit, and that was Kate Shelter. This guild still has the ability to steal Nirvana, which means they need to be eliminated first for the Oracion Seis to succeed. Jellal hears this and calls Midnight out for being a monster, but Midnight just turns it on him, saying that Jellal is far more evil than anyone in Oracion Seis. He put children into slave labor, killed his friends, attempted to sacrifice Urza. If anything, it would make more sense for him to side with them than to oppose them. But Urza gets back up and interrupts, saying she knows all the darkness in his past, but she also knows the light that shines inside of him. And to protect that light, she is ready to enter round 2 with Midnight. It's been a minute since Urza blew us all away, so this is long overdue. As the fight picks back up, she claims she has already found 2 weaknesses in Midnight's magic, as she dives in with her weapons, only to send him flying with a palm strike. These weaknesses are, firstly, that Midnight can reflect magic, but that's all he can reflect. The human body itself is out of his control. And second, he seems to still need to dodge when he reflects things, which means that he can only bend space at one point at a time. She also swaps out to the Infinity Robe, armor which can stretch so that Midnight's magic can't manipulate it. This reminds me a lot of Galuna, where Urza almost immediately puts together that there's a false membrane causing the curse on the village rather than the moon itself. I think it's easy to be impressed by how strong Urza is in most arcs, but because she can often be a little bit goofy and has a bit of a one-track mind, it is also easy to forget that she is a straight-up genius when it comes to analyzing magic and battlefield tactics. Pushed into a corner, Midnight transforms into this monster form as these insane tentacles reach out and pierce through both Urza and Jellal in an instant. But again, Urza comes through. She remembers that Midnight said he can make illusions, so she just closes her real eye and sees through this fake reality he is putting forward. And because Midnight was so sure they had been trapped in his trick, he left himself wide open to being taken down, and that is all 6 done. The only remaining member is Brain's staff, who is currently trying to sneak a peek up Lucy's skirt because it's been a few chapters since someone did that. But once Midnight goes down, the staff starts freaking out. All the tattoos on Brain's face have disappeared, and suddenly his eyes open back up. However, they are completely black. This is his alternate personality, Zero, a man who was so violent and cruel that even Brain felt he couldn't be free, so he used 6 keys, the Oracion Seis, to seal him away. Right away, Zero is a force. He takes aim at Jura to get back at him for hurting Brain, so Gray creates an ice shield to protect him, but it is broken apart like nothing. At the same time, Natsu goes in for a sneak attack, but Zero still manages to counter and sends him flying in one strike. Lucy is so afraid that she can't even move, so Zero blasts her with magic as well. In a matter of seconds, all 3 of them are completely dominated. Overlooking his enemies, Zero calls out that the fight isn't finished yet. After all, their bodies are still recognizable. The dude is a savage, he's nuts. So much so that when the staff mentions that they are approaching Kate's shelter, Zero kills him for suggesting they have a specific target. He just wants to destroy everything. That said, he is still going to start with Kate's shelter, so I don't know what he's so upset about. With Midnight gone, Urza and Jellal meet up with Wendy, and Jellal reveals that he has no memories of her. To make matters worse though, without his square of self-destruction, there is nothing he is able to do to stop Nirvana. Not that there's any time left, as Nirvana fires at Kate's shelter. But luckily they aren't alone. Christina has returned to the air, and Hibiki used her to attack Nirvana's leg, sending the structure off balance and causing it to miss its attack. And you might be asking, didn't this thing blow up before? Well, Leon patched its wings with ice, Sherry used her doll magic to make it move, and Ren's air magic allows it to float. Really cool combination of magics to complete a practical task. Unfortunately, this one shot is all they had in them, and Christina begins falling down towards the earth. As it descends, Hibiki reveals that his archive magic had information on Nirvana. Each of its 6 legs acts as a pipe, which sucks up magic from the earth. If the lacrima attached to each leg is attacked simultaneously, then Nirvana can be destroyed. So as is tradition at this point, we have another timer set up, as it will take 20 minutes for the weapon to refuel. On top of that, it turns out Brain was listening. Brain also has archive magic, so he was able to access all the same information as Hibiki. So he plans to take out Natsu's group, then stand guard over one of the lacrima so that their plan just can't be completed. This means when the wizards split up to destroy the lacrima, they have a 1 in 6 chance of finding Zero. Or it would if we had 6 wizards who could actually destroy a lacrima. Wendy has no offensive magic, so that just leaves Urza, Jellal, and Ichiya. And what a fucking banger of a panel as we see Leon, Sherry, and Hibiki calling for Grey, Lucy, and Natsu, and our lads force their way back on their feet so that they can finish this mission. It's this really powerful moment. They are exhausted, beaten down, dripping in sweat, but they have things they need to do, so they have to make it happen. And that's just all there is to it. It is just pure perseverance. So everyone decides where they're going. Urza hides that Jellal is involved to avoid Natsu getting overwhelmed with everything going on. Aside from that, whoever ends up finding Zero will have to take him on alone. That's the only option left. That said, Ichiya is still tied down, so he's not going to be much help. Luckily, he isn't the one who finds Zero. That, of course, falls to Natsu. Urza assumes that he actually used his nose to sniff out where Zero would be hiding so that he could take him on himself and his friends wouldn't be in danger. However, upon hearing Natsu's name, Jellal is suddenly flooded with darkness for a moment. So much so that he doesn't go to Path 6 as intended. Instead, he goes to find Natsu, who is already finding Zero, and the dude sneak attacks Natsu. His memories have returned, or at least the ones of Natsu, so he came here before heading to his own lacrima to attack him. However, he is specifically attacking him with fire. But Natsu is more concerned with giving him hell over making Urza cry. This doesn't make any difference to Zero. He doesn't care if it's 1 or 2 targets, so he just fires an attack, which Jellal dives in front of in the same way that Simon had protected Urza from his attack in the Tower of Heaven. He then turns to Natsu and tells him that if he wants to kill him after this, he can do whatever he wants. He is just shreds of who he used to be anyways, so it just doesn't matter. For now though, he gifts Natsu with a golden flame, a ball of fire that contains just about all of Jellal's magic, which Natsu can absorb to take on Zero. Jellal believes that Natsu has what he calls the unlimited power of hope, something we also talked about when I discussed why I never hated Laxus during the Battle for Fairy Tail. Natsu has the ability to inspire both the audience and the characters in the story in a very tangible way in how they interact with the world. Because of that, Jellal is gifting him this fire rather than taking on Zero himself, because sure, Jellal is a strong wizard and he might be able to stop Zero, but Natsu's power is the ability to harness the hope that others put in him and make the impossible possible. So while Jellal might be able to stop Zero, he knows that Natsu will stop Zero. Much like when he consumed Ether Nano, this pushes Natsu into Dragon Force. He completely takes the advantage, now outspeeding Zero and even deflecting his attacks. As for the lacrima Jellal was supposed to do, he sends Wendy, telling her that Dragon Slayer magic was made to slay dragons, and he is sure that she will be able to stop the lacrima on her own. As for the others, Lucy is still completely tapped out from using hyper magic and has no magic power left to use to destroy the lacrima. However, her emotions inspired Gemini, and they become a clone of her who is able to destroy the lacrima for her. Meanwhile, Wendy starts taking in the power of the sky itself, trying to find a way to turn it into a weapon that she can fight with. And Ichiya is still tied up, but at least he looks great, so that's all that really matters. As they continue to fight, Zero takes back control until Natsu straight up says that he is using the power of friendship. Like, actually, Zero says you can't do this alone, and Natsu starts talking about how he isn't alone because he can hear the voices and feelings of his friends. Their power, their faith, and their emotions are constant reminders to keep getting back up. This is the power of his friends coursing through his body. And I'm down with friendship and emotional weight giving a power boost. We've talked about it a few times now and why it makes sense within the story, but directly saying it makes the moment feel very cheesy in a weird way. This ain't Yu-Gi-Oh! We don't actually have to say it. With both fighters at their peak, they use their ultimate attacks. Zero creates this flood of demonic energy that fills the room, but Natsu's golden flame just burns through it, and in one massive blast, he knocks Zero through the lacrima. Meanwhile, all 5 of the other wizards managed to break their lacrima as well. If you're wondering, Ichiya freed himself and got real buff, and Wendy used Sky Dragon's Roar. With that, Nirvana is not just sealed away, but entirely destroyed. The entire structure begins collapsing and everyone makes an escape effort, which ends with Wendy hugging Natsu and thanking him for keeping his promise to save her guild. On a more heavy side, the Jellal situation is explained to everyone. Urza takes him aside and asks what he intends to do, and he isn't sure, but he's worried about who he will become when his memories return. However, Urza promises that whatever happens, she will be on his side. They might end up hating each other again, but she will not leave him. It's a cute moment that is ruined when the Magic Council arrives. This group of soldiers is being led by a dude named Lahar, and the entire force has a very crusade-style design. It looks like they are about to wage some kind of holy war. They are here to arrest the Oracion Seis, including Richard, despite him having his personality shifted and becoming a decent guy. In fact, he's so chill that he just agrees to be taken into custody, and Jura promises to search for his brother for him, so Richard tells him that the guy's name is Wally Buchanan. That is right, Wally, the Lego Mafia guy from the Tower of Heaven, and the reason he went missing was because he was brought to the tower as a slave when they were children. But more importantly, did their mom fuck Porygon or something? What happened here? As a side note, the anime shows that all of the members of the Oracion Seis were also prisoners in the Tower of Heaven. However, we don't see this in the manga. Urza obviously explains that she knows Wally and that he is safe, healthy, and traveling the continent with friends, and Richard falls to his knees crying because he is so happy to hear it. More pressing than even the Oracion Seis though, Lahar sees Jellal and orders that he surrenders so that he can be imprisoned forever or killed. And I like that Natsu is the one who instinctually tries to defend him. As Jellal is taken away, he apologizes to Wendy, saying that he's sorry for never remembering her. However, it makes him happy to know that he had done at least one positive thing in his previous life. The whole time he's walking away, Urza is like, I have to stop them. If they take him now, he'll never come back. He's finally good again and I'm losing him. I refuse to let him go. But while she's battling with her own position, Natsu is watching her. He knows that if Jellal goes, then Urza is going to cry again. So on a dime, this man attacks, saying that he won't let Jellal go, and good God do I love this idiot. Obviously, Lahar has his soldiers turn on Natsu, so Gray defends him, then Jura jumps in, then Ichiya, and even Lucy and Happy. All of them are defending Jellal as though he is one of their own. Everything devolves into chaos until Urza is the one who calls for it to stop, saying they have Jellal and they should take him away. Just because she loves him doesn't mean that she can put that on everyone else. Even so, it clearly isn't any easier for her. As Jellal begins to walk away, he calls back to Urza and tells her that it wasn't just her name that he remembered, it was also the color of her hair. Once she's on her own, Urza thinks back to the first time meeting Jellal. Everyone was introducing themselves, but Urza was unlike the others. There was Jellal Fernandez, Wally Buchanan, and Urza. Just Urza. This is when Jellal suggested that she make her last name Scarlet to match her beautiful hair. Fernandez or Buchanan might be hard to remember, but surely anyone who saw her would always know that she was Urza Scarlet. The next day, everyone returns to Kate's shelter and the guildmaster, Robal, thanks them for stopping Nirvana. However, he has hidden a truth that he needs to reveal to everyone. Kate's shelter is not actually the descendants of the Nervit, they are the Nervit, and Robal was the man who created Nirvana 400 years ago. Back then, as the Nervit tried to take away darkness from the world, that darkness would bind itself to Nirvana and contaminated the people living on it. And so the Nervit turned on each other and were completely wiped out with the exception of Robal. As the lone survivor of Nirvana and its creator, he would live on as a ghost for 400 years until someone appeared who could destroy the weapon. Now that that time has come, Kate's shelter could finally fade away. And one by one, the members of the guild suddenly begin to vanish. This whole time, they had been illusions that he made to keep Wendy company. Which, on the one hand, is super sweet, an old man creating an entire guild just to make a young girl smile, but on the other hand, holy shit, hey Wendy, everyone you've ever known and loved is just an illusion, anyways, I gotta go. Robal explains that now that she has real friends, there's no need for her to stay in a daydream of a guild, and Wendy is heartbroken. Obviously. But all the same, this is where Urza comforts her, saying, it is a painful thing to part with the ones you've loved, but your friends can fill that hole. And if anyone knows that to be true, it is Urza. And just like Urza when she was a child and had nowhere else to go, Wendy decides to join Fairy Tail. Her joining is actually the best possible solution for Natsu, who now has an answer for his motion sickness. Well, at least until the Troya spell wears off. As for Lucy, she is now in possession of the Aries, Scorpio, and Gemini gate keys, as well as her old ones, bringing her up to a total of 9 of the 12 golden keys, arguably making her one of the strongest celestial wizards alive. There's also this really cute moment where Lucy's like, oh, I have 3 new people to be friends with, and the spirits are confused by being considered to be people by Lucy. Very wholesome, super upsetting, Angel kinda sucks. Anyways, when Wendy arrives at the guild, she is immediately part of the family. Everyone is super excited to have a new Dragon Slayer and a new talking cat, all with the exception of Gajiel, who is questioning his very existence. After all, if he doesn't have a cat, is he even a real Dragon Slayer? That said, we are finally introduced to one more Fairy Tail wizard, 165 chapters in, having been hyped up as the strongest wizard in the guild since chapter 48, and that is Gildarts, who has returned to Magnolia. Alarm bells start ringing as Mira tells Lucy about quests that are even more dangerous than S-Class. The SS quest class is dedicated to quests that take an entire decade to complete. But Gildarts is returning from something even crazier, a century quest, which he has returned from after only 3 years. And if that's not crazy enough, sirens start blaring, warning the town that Magnolia is about to undergo the Gildarts shift, telling everyone to get into their assigned positions. The entire city is lifted up and a clear path is made for Gildarts to head directly to Fairy Tail. This had to be put in place because of Gildarts' magic, which turns anything he touches into dust. So if he isn't paying attention, he could destroy entire buildings just by brushing against them. And cue the calls of him looking like Shanks. In the anime, sure, the animators made him look more like Shanks. The actual manga images of him just straight up do not look like Shanks. I mean, look at these two. Natsu goes in to fight the dude only to be launched away with one hand, but then Makarov asks how the mission went, and it turns out that Gildarts failed, which gives us the question, what the fuck does this quest have to be if this guy failed? As he leaves, by walking through the wall by the way, he tells Natsu to meet him at his house for a gift. When they arrive, Gildarts asks if Natsu and Lisanna are still hitting it off, teasing him like that one uncle that we all have, but Natsu has to tell him that Lisanna actually died 2 years ago. Turns out, life goes on, or in this case, I guess it doesn't. Regardless of whether or not Gildarts has been present, 3 years is a long time and a lot has happened in that time. Once they get over that bit of awkwardness, Gildarts tells Natsu that on his mission he saw a black dragon. Our first actual proof that dragons are still alive aside from the conversations between Grandini and Igneal. Of course, Natsu wants to go check things out, but Gildarts warns him not to, removing his cloak to show that the dragon took his left arm, left leg, and a chunk of his gut as well. Oh, he has one arm, just like Shanks. Yeah, he also has one leg. Is he like Zeref now too? Anyways, he says that he doesn't know anything about Igneal, but this black dragon is the enemy to humanity. So, let's talk remaining big bads that we know about. We have Ivan and Raventail, Hades and Grimoire Heart, Tartaros, Zeref, if he's ever awakened, and this black dragon. The more the story continues, the more dangerous names are popping up on the radar, even if we aren't interacting with them directly right now. Meanwhile, Makarov thinks about how Fairy Tail now has 3 Dragon Slayers, just as he was told would happen by poor Liusuka, noting that fate is trying to move things along. This heavily implying that he knows of some end goal that we are actually getting towards. But even more important than prophecies with the fate of the world in the balance is that Gajiel is desperate to find a cat, and he has been wandering around Magnolia looking for a friend for so long that he is completely dehydrated. And Happy is also trying to get a cat, bringing fish to Carla and trying to win her over. However, she is completely uninterested, yelling at him and walking away. The worst she could say is no, right, fellas? But Happy is so earnest. When she tells him that she doesn't like fish, he's like, well, what could I bring you then? And the little guy is just trying so hard. But what Carla is actually upset about is that Happy doesn't know who they are or what they are, and because of that, he won't be able to protect Natsu. But she does know something. So you know how we talked about how Natsu's faith in someone could stop you from hating them? Well, I love Wendy, but her faith in Carla is not stopping her from coming across as the absolute fucking worst. At least with Laxus, we had his goal in mind. He wanted to make Fairy Tail stronger so they wouldn't be a joke anymore. But without the context of what she knows, Carla is just coming across as cold, spiteful, and completely hateful. Worse yet, it's not even something she pushes to everyone. She is only mean to Happy. And he's happy, man. We fucking love Happy, and you're making him sad. And it's only supplemented by how earnest and hopeful he is despite how she is treating him. She actually hates him so much that she only calls him Male Cat because he doesn't deserve to be called Happy. Up front, Carla isn't really a character I warmed up to for a very long time in my first run through of the series, but I think reading this, I actually dislike her more than I did the first time. But we do finally get some answers in this arc, though they only come with more questions as Mistogen arrives. He's surprised to see that Wendy has joined Fairy Tail and explains that 7 years ago when he was new to this world, he was the one who helped her, and because he didn't know any better, he was using the name Jellal at that time. Wendy takes this surprisingly well, but she's told that she needs to leave Magnolia. Mistogen explains that he failed to stop something called Anima, and soon it will wipe the entire city off the map, and all of Fairy Tail along with it. Calamity is coming, and the guild has no idea. Because of this, it's business as usual, and Mira and Elfman are planning to go pay respects to Lisana since it's the anniversary of her death. Lot of Lisana talk lately, isn't that interesting? As they leave, a giant maelstrom appears in the sky and sucks the entire town away, leaving only a field of smoke and bubbles where it once stood. At first, Wendy believes that she's the only survivor, but Natsu soon bursts through the floor. He had been sleeping, so she needs to explain what had happened, and Carla flies in to tell them that only Dragon Slayers were left behind. Anima, the gate which absorbed Magnolia, was a passage to the world of Edolas, the world that both Carla and Happy are from, as well as Mistogen. Basically, Edolas is a world losing its magic, so the king decided to latch it onto another world and siphon their magic through Anima. Originally, they were going to open a bunch of portals, but Mistogen kept stopping them one after another. But one finally did open. The cats have been sent to the main world to complete specific missions. However, Happy was born without any memories of that mission, so the reason Carla hates him is that he lived carefree without any burden like she has had to carry for her entire life. Natsu decides that if his guild is in Edolas, then he will go there as well. They learn about a fairy tale in Edolas, and Natsu decides that they're going to go check it out, and Carla even agrees to take everyone on a few conditions. Most importantly, they need to hide from the kingdom. Happy can't try to discover their orders, and if either cat acts to betray them, Natsu and Wendy are to kill them on the spot. With all that set in stone, the cats fly them through the remaining traces of Anima, and they arrive in Edolas. Important question though, if only Dragon Slayers are unaffected, where is Gajiel? Why didn't they look for him? The dude's already feeling super lonely right now, this can't be helping. Either way, they arrive in Edolas, and it is cool as hell. Floating islands, bubbles that grow on trees and float into the air, rivers that curve into the sky, and most notably, no magic. And without magic, both Happy and Carla's wings disappear and everyone plummets to the ground. Soon we find Edolas Fairy Tale, a very cool looking guild hall created from roots and filled with parallel versions of our own world's characters. We have a very forward Juvia who is being pursued by a version of Grey wearing multiple layers of clothes. There's a bully version of Jet and Droy who are picking on a wimpy Elfman, a sober Kana, and Lucy who looks like, well, this. Edolas Lucy notices our gang and gives Natsu a huge hug, asking where he's been all this time and saying that she was worried. However, there's one person who shouldn't be there. Among this crowd of unfamiliar faces is someone who should be dead right now, Lisanna. We've seen Natsu do a lot of things. We've seen him be happy, sad, worried, excited, but we have never seen him so touched to see someone that he starts crying, and it's actually a very powerful scene. The real moment of realization comes when they find Edolas Wendy, though. Since our Wendy is here, that means that all of these aren't just their own friends after a personality change, they are entirely different people. Carla wants to leave for the castle, but before they can, the kingdom's fairy hunters arrive. In Edolas, Fairy Tail is the last wizard guild, and so the kingdom sends hunters to eliminate them, meaning in effect, here we are the Dark Guild. They arrive on this towering, bull-like demonic beast, but before they can attack, Levi uses a transfer square and teleports the guild away. We only see two of the hunters here. First is a knight in shining armor named Sugar Boy, which is just the worst name. But it's kind of a fun twist. Usually the idea of this character archetype is the hero in a classic fairy tale. So, on the topsy-turvy planet of Edolas, the knight in shining armor is actually the villain. The second hunter we see is a woman wearing video game armor for women, is the best way I can describe it, Urza Nightwalker. In a world where everyone is the opposite, the Queen of the Fairies has become the source of all the fairies' fear. As these two talk, we learn that Earthland's wizards have been turned into a massive lacrima, which can supply Edolas with the magic it needs to survive for a while longer. In the commotion, the people of this fairy tale learn that Natsu isn't from here, as well as everything else that's going on. So he asks them to guide him to the capital. However, he's warned against going there. Whatever little magic this world has to offer has been monopolized by the kingdom. And even beyond that, there's the Royal Magic Warfare Division, who wiped out all the world's wizard guilds one by one, with Sugar Boy leading the 4th division and Urza leading the 2nd. We also get to see the 3rd division leader, Hughes, who has a ton of energy, is very excitable, and who is very unlike the military chief of staff, Byro. It might be Biro, but we're going to go with Byro. This guy has literal devil horns made of hair and is pressing for the elimination of Fairy Tail. Finally, the leader of the 1st division is Panther Lily, a buff cat soldier with a scar down his eye to show how battle-hardened he is. Panther Lily, despite being a military leader, is actually concerned with the kingdom's focus on expanding its military. In his mind, the kingdom basically rules the entire world already. Their only opposition right now is Fairy Tail, and they already have them running scared. So if the whole world belongs to them, why are they preparing for war? Given that we just opened the anima portal to Earthland, it could be that they are preparing to invade the other world. Why slowly siphon its magic when you could just conquer the planet itself? Now, the last two members of the kingdom that we need to meet are Coco and Faust. Coco is Byro's aide. She's a girl wearing a rabbit hood that runs around chaotically. You ever drink 4 cans of Monster Energy, snort 2 lines of Coke, and take a shot of espresso? Well, that's Coco's default state. As for Faust, this is the king of Edolas, who wants to unlimit the kingdom's magic, saying that he wants eternity, which he could achieve through an undying font of magic. And obviously, this guy's evil, right? I mean, look at him and what he's doing. But what I'm more interested in is his name, Faust. When it comes to literary devices and writing tools, the Faustian bargain is easily one of the most famous. Essentially, it's a deal with the devil, trading your soul in exchange for something that you'd otherwise not be able to obtain. And usually there is an unknown negative as well. It's kind of like a spin on the monkey paw or literal genie wish. You get something great, but you must give something greater. And this chapter is really interesting because based on what we've seen from the kingdom's characters, we can kind of piece together the outline for the arc. The king Faust made a Faustian bargain or a deal with the devil to gain access to magic. And hey, we have a sketchy old man over here, Byro, who has devil horns. So maybe he's manipulating the king in some way. Meanwhile, we have Panther Lily, who is cautious of his kingdom and might be looking to rebel against it, or at least what it's planning to do. All the while, Gajiel continues to look for a cat to recruit as his partner. A lot of cool potential paths that we could be following here. Anyways, as for our own group, Natsu chases a frog to give to Lucy, but that upsets a giant mama frog, and Natsu realizes, hey, without magic, I can't fight this frog. But Tsundere Lucy arrives and saves his ass with this awesome whip, and explains that she will be joining us for the rest of the mission. As we explore with Lucy, she gives us a quick rundown of how magic works on Edolas. Rather than an individual having their own magic, objects store magic here and can be used until they run out. Selling these objects has become illegal though, so they have to head to the black market. Here, Natsu picks up a badass torch that spews flames, which they use to fend off a group of guards, only to use up almost the entire supply of magic in just one shot. Luckily, before they're captured by the remaining guards, Wendy uses her own magic tool by mistake and summons a tornado that sends them flying away. It's definitely a very cool spin on the presentation of magic so far. To this point, magic has been such a personal thing. It is imbued in both the character's design and personality, and because of that, so much is built off of the idea of what magic a character can produce. But in Edolas, anyone could use any tool. Magic doesn't come from your emotions, your personality, your story. It comes from a store. Instead, having the ingenuity to use these items and get the most out of them becomes the priority here, and it completely changes how we're looking at magic because of that. Once everyone is safe and they're in hiding, they overhear the guards taking someone into custody, and it's our Lucy being taken away. Which means she isn't in the Lacrima like we thought. Even more importantly, our Lucy, for some reason, is able to use her celestial spirit keys, making use of both Scorpio and Ares for the first time to deal with these guards. As we find out, when the anima started absorbing Magnolia, Horologium appeared to save Lucy. And for such a goofy spirit, this guy genuinely might be her most useful spirit. He comes in clutch so often. Once they're safe, everyone gets caught up, and Edolas Lucy asks, "You guys are actually going to take on the entire kingdom?" And our gang is just like, duh, of course. She's basically going through the classic learning curve of dealing with Fairy Tail. And shout out to our Lucy, gloating about being the best and strongest wizard in Fairy Tail, currently. I guess if all of your friends are kidnapped and the ones who are remaining don't have any magic, you might as well make the most of it. Once they find a place to rest, Edo Lucy tries to flash Natsu, which upsets our Lucy since they have the same body, and this ultimately leads to a discussion about being able to tell them apart. So Lucy summons Cancer and has him cut Edo Lucy's hair, and now she's rocking a much shorter hairstyle. And I like this conversation that follows as well. Lucy asks if her counterpart is sure that she wants to cut her hair, and Edo Lucy basically says, "Hey, we got bigger shit going on than our hairstyle. It doesn't matter what they look like or if they are boys or girls, anything like that, because they have to be focused on more important things like just staying alive." Most importantly, she talks about how that makes Fairy Tail so important. It's a place where friends can meet and force out a laugh so that their hearts don't break. It's actually a very similar idea to our own Fairy Tail, the place where people with dark clouds can come to find happiness. It's just that that idea is taken to 11. For those who skipped the first part of this video, dark clouds is another very important motif and theme that we see throughout the story. It's something that Mira mentions in one of the first chapters, that everyone in the guild is suffering from something, even if everyone's laughing and joking all the time. Specifically, she was talking about Natsu at the time, who lost Igneal but is still able to put on a happy face and look forward. But it applies to everyone in the guild. Anyways, despite everyone getting along and literally just having changed her hair to make traveling together easier, the next day, Edo Lucy has disappeared, leaving a note saying, "Go easy, I'm going home." In reality, she left because the idea of people from another world saving them was unacceptable. If their world was going to change, it should be the people who live there who change it for themselves. To me, this still screams Lucy energy, but rather than striving for self-improvement, she's aiming for the growth of her entire world, and that's kinda cool. Meanwhile, our own Lucy has picked up a book on the history of Edolas where she learns about a group called the Exceed who lived 100 years ago. It's probably not relevant though, right? Anyways, a kingdom airship prepares to take off towards the capital as a bunch of knights talk about the extraction of the magic from the giant Lacrima in 2 days. Carla explains that this means that those trapped will never be able to return to their original form. So naturally, our plan is to sneak on board, but they get caught almost immediately. The ship takes off, and because of this, we finally get to meet Edolas Natsu. And what's the opposite of Natsu? That's right, someone who loves to drive and has a magic four-wheeler. And this dude is rad as fuck, picking up the gang and speeding off with them as our Natsu is basically dying in the back seat. Unfortunately, this Natsu can't take them very far, as the magic in his car is limited, so he needs to get back to Fairy Tail. He also adds that he only came this far because Edolas forced him to, and before he leaves, he asks our group to not get his guild involved in their fight. Also, there's a good bit where Natsu pulls his counterpart out of the car, and the dude begins shaking in fear because he gets anxiety when he's not in a vehicle. He is most certainly the anti-Natsu. As he and our group go their separate ways, Edo Natsu shrinks into himself, saying no one can beat the whole royal family, and that it is unbelievable that these people want to fight the kingdom, but our Natsu just gives his usual carefree smile. As we enter the capital city, we see what seems to be an entirely different world. While we've been told that Edolas has barely any magic, the capital is filled with magic. Lights, music, children's rides, holograms. It's like if a medieval town was spruced up and inspired by Tokyo or New York. While those outside the capital survive on scraps of magical energy, those within live wasteful and extravagant lives. We'll talk about this in a little bit. But soon, we come across a massive lacrima in the center of the city that's surrounded by guards. It is all that's left of Magnolia, and King Faust explains that it's enough magic to last for a decade. Now, I'm no rocket surgeon, but if it took 10 years to collect this magic, and it's going to last 10 years, then they're basically just back where they started, which is probably why they're planning to invade the other world. Siphoning magic just isn't practical at this point. The king goes on to rant and rave about his own greatness and promises to produce even more magic, cracking the lacrima with his staff in his fervor, which completely sets Natsu off. It's just a small chip of the stone that falls off, but who's to say what that represents? It could very well be a piece of their friends which has been severed forever, but luckily cooler heads prevail and Lucy is able to hold him back from making a scene. The gang regroups and comes up with a plan to use Gemini to become Faust and get any and all information that he might have on saving their friends. To reach the king, Carla recommends taking an underground tunnel that leads into the castle, claiming that she knows about it because she had been getting visions of the geography of Edolas since they arrived here. As they explore the dark tunnels beneath the city, things begin getting very tense. And then Natsu gets a brilliant idea. He gives Lucy his torch and starts making shadow puppets on the wall, which, if nothing else, at least breaks the tension. The whole way through, Carla continues to lead them and give directions, which is a bit sketchy when combined with the idea of this shady past with Edolas that she keeps alluding to. Eventually we come to a big clearing, which anyone who's played any video game ever will realize to be a boss area, and in an instant the group is surrounded by Urza and her soldiers who trap them in ooze. However, as the knights see Happy and Carla, they all begin to kneel down. They welcome home the Exceeds and thank them for turning in the invaders. Everyone is locked up in prison immediately, Natsu and Wendy in one cell, and Lucy is trapped in a pillory in the other. As for the Exceeds, Hughes explains that they have been returned to their own country for completing their mission. Weird that they have an entire country, when Lucy's book explains that they were supposed to be alive 100 years ago, but whatever. Either way, we catch up to Carla and Happy, who wake up in a palace on a floating island where they meet Edolas Ichia, who is both a cat and the captain of Extalia's Imperial Guard, as well as Nadi, the Minister of State. Extalia, by the way, is the home country of the Exceed. These two bring Happy and Carla to meet their queen, but along the way we see a place filled with Exceeds that looks almost similar to Magnolia, except with this weird, bendy drunk visual to it. As they walk, Nichia and Nadi explain that they see humans as inferior, and their queen decides which of them need to be killed since they just keep breeding without permission. They say that she is a goddess who has that right as she rules over all of Edolas and Earthrealm. And here, Carla finally explains what her mission was. The queen had sent her to the other world to control humanity and kill the dragon slayer Wendy, which Happy quickly extrapolates on to understand that his mission must have been to murder Natsu. But Nadi corrects them. He explains that 100 Exceed eggs had been sent to Earthland with the mission of killing dragon slayers when they hatched. But when humanity created Anima, that mission changed. In order to take advantage of Dragon Slayer's magic, the Exceeds on Earthland were instead told to bring their Dragon Slayers into custody. In overwriting this mission, the cat's memories were affected, which is why Happy has no clue about any of this. But Carla completely breaks down as Nadi tells her that the visions she had been receiving were basically remote instructions, saying that even her desire to protect Wendy was a delusion that stemmed from her orders. After all, Wendy must live if she is to be brought to Edolas. As she falls to her knees crying, Happy stands his fucking ground, declaring that they are not puppets to be controlled, they are fairy tale wizards. And as he defends the meaning behind their entire lives, Carla looks to him and for the first time calls him by his name. Happy grabs her by the paw and shouts that they will save everyone if they have to, leading to the entire royal guard being set out on them, which they manage to escape just by the skin of their teeth. Once they're free, they spot a floating lacrima even bigger than the one in the capital, which they are convinced is where Fairy Tail is being held. Supposedly, the rest of Magnolia was given to the humans, while the wizards were kept for the Exceeds. They also notice that the island that they are on is miles above Edolas, which is a real problem since they can't fly in this world. Luckily, they are found by an angry old farmer cat who takes them in for safety since he hates the government, which, based. The farmer's wife talks to them briefly about the shape of people's hearts, saying that she's happy to hear that they're trying to save humans because they are friends. Even if they look different, the shapes of their hearts are all that matters. But Carla is struggling with what's in her own heart right now. She doesn't know where her own beliefs and actions started and where her orders ended. But our boy Happy tells her that she's able to find her heart in her desire to save her friends. The Lady Cat then tells us a bit about their history here. The Exceed see themselves as angels above humans, and she used to feel that way too, until the Queen took her child as one of the 100 eggs confiscated to kill the Dragon Slayers. She and her husband opposed the plan, but their child was sent to Earthland in the end anyways. Ultimately, her husband comes back and tells Happy and Carla that they need to hurry up and get going, saying that fear is something that keeps old men from taking the actions that they should have, but luckily, the younger generation isn't smart or jaded enough to know that fear yet, which Happy takes to heart, saying that he's been filled with fear and doubt since arriving in Edolas, but now they need to take action, they need to fly, and he once again grabs Carla's hand before diving off the island and growing their wings back. As they fly away, the woman tells her husband that Happy flies just like he does, and asks if he thinks Carla is his girlfriend, and despite the crotchety old man act, the farmer starts bawling as he watches the cat that would have been his son fly away. So this is an episode that I really remember from the anime, but it had a very different feel in the manga, and a big part of that is color. Specifically, the woman has the same color of blue that Happy does, while the man has the white patch from his stomach. The whole time that they're together, you kind of have this feeling that they're his parents in the anime, whereas in the manga, it's all black and white, right? So you kind of miss that one element. And it's not a huge thing, but I think it does make a difference in how this feels. Of course, they also spend more time here in the anime, so that probably made quite a bit of difference as well. Back at Edolas Castle, Faust has received orders to execute Lucy. Meanwhile, Byro is excited to experiment on the Dragon Slayers and wants to try turning them into magical generators. Again, Panther Lily tries to raise his concerns, but in the end, he decides it just isn't worth it right now. Edolas Urza Nightwalker, heads down to the dungeon to grab Lucy, and she's surprised to hear that the Earthland Urza is her friend and a fellow member of Fairy Tail. But this just upsets Nightwalker, and she drags Lucy through the hall by her hair until she reaches a balcony where she throws Lucy to her death, only for Happy and Carla to swoop down and save her at the last moment. Well, Carla saves her. Happy flies into a wall, but that's pretty much par for the course. Carla then tells Urza that the order has been rescinded and puts on a show as a high and powerful Exceed, telling her to know her place and claiming to be the daughter of Queen Shagget, Princess Carla. This almost works, but Panther Lily arrives and calls her and Happy out as fallen Exceed in a genuinely terrifying looking panel. They did, however, at least succeed in finding out that Natsu and Wendy were in the East Tower, so they head over only to be met by a swarm of Exceed in the air and an army of humans on the ground. Faust then enacts code ETD, standing for Exceed Total Destruction, as a set of light beams are focused on the sky and turn the Exceed's force into a cat-shaped lacrima. This creates an opportunity for our gang to escape, and while they do, Faust explains that humans are going to rise up against the Exceed and steal away their magical power. Naturally, Panther Lily isn't exactly super stoked when he realizes that the reason the military was being built up was to destroy his own people. And while all of that is going on, Byro is preparing to steal Natsu and Wendy's magic, while Urza Nightwalker meets with Lucy and the cats before they can enter the tower. We start hearing Wendy scream as Urza blasts everyone with her magical weapons, and all hope looks lost as Happy once again stands to protect Carla, but as this Urza goes in for the killing blow, our Urza bursts through a wall with Grey. However, unlike Natsu and Wendy, these two are also able to access all of their magic. Things quickly begin to move as the battle between Urzas erupt, ours constantly swapping between armors, while Nightwalker transforms her 10 Commandments spear into different shapes and styles. Oh, and Edo Urza marks her face with blood, which looks super cool and helps us tell them apart. Meanwhile, Grey takes the others down the tower, explaining that Mistigan sent Gajiel to save them, claiming Dragon Slayers can revert Blackermas back into people. And we've been here a while, and no one has mentioned the possibility that Gajiel was okay as well, which is a bit wild to me. I do think it's kind of interesting having Dragon Slayers be the answer to unsealing the Lacrima. It can be used to kind of explain why they wanted to invade Earthland and kill the Dragon Slayers to begin with, but it does kind of feel a little bit convenient as well at the same time. Regardless, Happy is sent off to take Gajiel back to the Big Lacrima as the others search for Natsu and Wendy. By the time they arrive, both are unconscious, but luckily, Grey has Mistigan's balls, which he puts in Natsu's mouth to revive him. X balls. They're pills Mistigan supplied them with so that they can use magic in Edolas. Get your mind out of the gutter, please. Lucy says that she also swallowed something, which I guess is a way of explaining why she can do magic, though it is weird that she can barely remember it. I don't know about you, but when I swallow, I remember. Anyways, the second Natsu can get to his feet, he makes a mad dash, saying that he needs to stop the King and Byro from using the Dragon Slayer magic they extracted to create weapons which will force the giant floating Lacrima to crash into Extalia. He is essentially hoping that this explosion will rinse the world in magical energy. Natsu isn't gone long though, as he immediately comes across his darkest fear. There is not one, but two Urzas out there. Him returning means that we can actually make a plan and progress, ultimately leaving us with 4 groups. Natsu, Lucy, and Grey will look for the king and a way to stop the attack. Wendy convinces Carla to bring her to Extalia so that she can try and warn them of what is happening, since despite being enemies, they are still people and they shouldn't be killed. Urza will fight Urza, and Happy will bring Gajiel to the giant Lacrima where they find Panther Lily. And speaking of Urza and Panther Lily, we have 4 groups and 4 division commanders in the Edolas military. Isn't that convenient? But we are still in that weird place where Wendy isn't supposed to be a fighter, so we gotta skew things a little bit, meaning Natsu's group comes across Sugar Boy and Hughes at the amusement park within the castle. That's right, they have an amusement park inside of the castle. This is the first really weird fight that we've had since Racer. Basically, Hughes has a wand that allows him to take control of and manipulate all the attractions in the park, which of course means that Natsu gets locked on a roller coaster and is out of commission. I do like the joke of Hughes saying, "You won't last more than 5 minutes at 10 times speed," and then looking over and seeing Natsu is already out in the first few seconds. Now, does this magic feel a little bit hyper-specific? Yeah. This dude is supposed to be one of the 4 commanders of the military, and his thing is controlling amusement park rides, which is just kind of goofy. I almost wish he was posed as more like someone who can use any magic tool effectively. Don't get me wrong, it's fun, but rather than someone specializing in roller coasters, I feel like saying someone who can even turn an amusement park into a weapon could be a little bit more effective, and I think that's probably why he just isn't that memorable of a character to me, which is too bad because I do really like his design and his personality quite a lot. Knowing Natsu is useless on the ride, Grey throws Lucy towards him in hopes that she can set him free. He also needs to save himself though, so Grey makes a grappling hook of ice and pulls himself to safety, and then swings down a giant ice scythe on Sugar Boy, which I will say is some of the more interesting and creative things we've seen him do with ice in a while. In response to Grey's attacks, we get to see Sugar Boy's Rosa Espada, a magic weapon that can make anything soft. If Hughes' magic reminds me of Racer's magic, then I would say that Sugar Boy's is also a parallel to Richard's from the Oracion Seis. Hughes ends up crashing Lucy and Natsu into a pool of water and boasts about how fun his world's magic is, and that it is such a shame that it's running out that it justifies wiping out all of Fairy Tail if it means he can keep playing with magic. Both Natsu and Lucy are furious hearing that, and Lucy calls Aquarius to help, and for the first time, she does so willingly. However, Aquarius's water now counts as being part of the amusement park, which means Hughes can take control over it. After a massive water attack, everyone wakes up inside of a monster academy where Lucy is put in a couple of different costumes until Natsu gets the idea to put her in something extra sexy to distract Hughes and open him up for an attack. Unfortunately, he is completely uninterested and instead turns all of the monsters against them. Ultimately, Lucy is forced to run away from the monsters, and Natsu ends up scaring the hell out of Hughes with his magic. Meanwhile, Byro's dragonic chain cannon is ready, so he gifts the king with the key to activate it. However, Coco warns him that Panther Lily is still on the Lacrima Island, so launching the cannon would kill him. To which the king goes, meh. But Coco is a real one, so she steals the key to protect her friends, continuing to run even when the king fries her legs with lightning. As she runs, she bumps into Lucy and becomes very conflicted, asking her for help until she realizes that she is from Earthland. However, Coco doesn't even need to ask, because the second Lucy sees Byro chasing after her, she stands up to defend the young girl. Although, admittedly, Lucy also thinks that the man is looking for one of her keys, rather than the key that Coco is carrying. As they fight, Byro takes a particular interest in Lucy's magic, the ability to summon something from nothing, and compares it to anima. As for his own magic, Byro uses magical liquids to fight, letting him create lava or wind, but either way, Lucy manages to push him into a corner until he drinks an octopus liquid, which turns him into a giant sea monster, and cool, we always love tentacle fights, right? This was always gonna go here, I guess. Anyways, Virgo gifts Lucy with a whip created from a celestial river, which is awesome, and effectively means that Lucy can now space out her summons a little bit more to defend herself rather than spamming them and depleting her magic. And she makes great use of this, completely turning the tide of the battle by tying the giant octopus up in a ball, all while giving him the usual friendship speech about how he is abusing Coco, just finishing in time for Natsu to blast Hughes through the wall and take both of the enemies out at once. I absolutely love this addition to Lucy's arsenal. It is a very fitting and effective way of balancing out her weaknesses without actually making her a fighter or too strong, you know? Seeing all of this, Coco resolves that she would rather live a peaceful life than a magical one, and decides to give the key to Lucy and Natsu. However, Sugar Boy Penguin slides in and steals it from them at the last moment, with Gray chasing him on a motorcycle. That's right, Gray has once again found himself on a motorcycle in a magic fight. Confused by how softening things lets Sugar Boy slide like this, Gray asks how he does it, and the dude is just like, I don't know, but I can, which feels a bit lazy, but it's also kind of funny. Sugar Boy's a bit of a goofy character, so he does get some leeway in how serious we have to take his magic, I think. Regardless, Gray creates a floor of ice to cause his opponents to slip, they crash into each other, and Gray freezes their hands together around the key. The two go hit for hit until the key starts cracking, and Sugar Boy offers a truce in panic. He explains that this key can be used to target the Lacrima rather than the island, and the Dragon Slayer magic from it will revert those trapped inside back to being human. Adding that even between Natsu, Gajeel, and Wendy, they won't be able to save everyone before they are converted into pure magic. Essentially, both sides need the key, so letting it break hurts everyone, and Sugar Boy knows that. But Gray completely disregards this, snapping the key and uses a badass ice blade to take Sugar Boy down. The enemy is shocked that he would risk his friends' lives like that, but Gray just smiles and remakes the key out of ice, saying his magic lets him make anything he needs, even if the original is gone. Absolute banger of a moment. Just like with Lucy, this arc has been really showing off more creative sides to their magic and letting them shine in a really cool way that I appreciate. While everyone is fighting in the castle, Wendy and Carla arrive on Extalia, but no matter how hard they try, the Exceed just aren't listening to their warnings, even going so far as to throw rocks at them. These are some racist-ass cats, y'all. You know who isn't a racist cat, though? Panther Lily. He and Gajeel are going toe-to-toe, though as they get to talking, Lily explains that he has now abandoned his life as both an Exceed and as a member of the Lying Kingdom, which Gajeel takes as an opportunity to adopt the cat so that he can be like the other Dragon Slayers. But unlike Natsu, who nurtured Happy's egg, or Wendy, who got taken care of by Carla, Gajeel is gonna beat Lily's ass until he wins his respect, which is a much more Gajeel way of doing things and makes for a very aggressive but very fun battle. Down at the castle, Nightwalker appears in front of Gray and Natsu, seemingly capturing them with ease after defeating our own Urza and then taking them as prisoners into the castle. Which, like, Obviously, this is our Urza in disguise. That's why Nightwalker put blood on her face earlier, so that we could tell them apart in this moment. She brings them both to the king and the Draconic chain cannon, and demands that Gray make a key to turn the machine on. However, as Gray puts the key in, he realizes there is no way for him to adjust the aim to save Fairy Tail. With him in position, Urza gives the signal and she and Natsu begin attacking everyone, even taking Faust as a hostage. But just as the cannon is about to fire at the Lacrima, the real Nightwalker returns, pretty much naked other than a cape, and her battle with Urza picks back up. Which honestly, good, because that shouldn't have been an off-screen fight. With Faust now free and the key in the cannon, he orders the weapon to fire at the Lacrima, releasing an attack that tethers it to Edolas. Moments later, Lucy and Coco sweep down on one of the kingdom's giant legion monsters. As it turns out, Coco's a pretty cool ally to have, and the two of them grab everyone else and then fly up towards the Lacrima to see if they can disconnect it. Nightwalker then cuts off her hair to further differentiate herself from our Urza, and leaves with the whole 2nd Division to chase after the Fairy Tail Wizards. However, Faust actually says he'll be joining them, asking the remaining soldiers to ready something called the Droma Anin. Using the Legion, the gang tries to slow down the Lacrima, but it doesn't seem to have any real effect. So Gray, Urza, Lucy, Natsu, Happy, and Gajil position themselves to help push the Lacrima away, which genuinely seems to impress Lily quite a bit. As for the other Exceed, as the Lacrima begins crashing into the outer edge of Extalia, Nadi realizes that Wendy and Carla were telling the truth and tries to get the mob to stop attacking them. However, everyone suddenly freezes when the Queen appears, removing her fancy clothing to reveal that she's not a goddess, she's just a normal Exceed like everyone else, with the exception of having only one wing. Essentially, the Exceed Elders created this idea of a queen years ago. Back then, they were seen as a weak race that humanity tormented. So by creating this false goddess, they tried to make themselves seem powerful enough to protect themselves. Shagget did have the power to see briefly into the future, and she used that to take credit for the deaths of humans, claiming it was the Queen's will and instilling fear in humanity that the Exceed were essentially all-powerful. Carla then makes a big scene about how even if she is faking, she still led to her friends being imprisoned. She still filled her head with commands to murder Dragon Slayers, and she is still responsible for what has happened. In response, the Queen throws Carla a sword, bows, and says she is willing to accept any punishment, but instead Carla stabs the blade into the ground. She berates the Queen for simply giving up, saying it doesn't matter if they are weak, this is their homeland, and they must fight to protect it. And with that, she soars off to the Lacrima. Carla arrives just as it is nearing the edge of the island and begins pushing with her friends. However, her words inspired the others, and Nadi is the first to join her, but moments later, hundreds of Exceeds fly in to help, including the one-winged Queen, who is struggling to keep in the air. Lily sees this and thinks back to his past when he brought a human child to the Queen's court. The child was wounded and he wanted to protect them, but the Queen stood in silence while the elders banished Lily for breaking Extalia's laws. But seeing his people unified in one great effort, Lily swoops in to grab the Queen and carries her to the Lacrima himself, saying they should both stop telling lies because he is tired of pretending that Extalia isn't his home. Even with all the Exceed and the Fairy Tail Wizards though, the Lacrima isn't stopping. Until, suddenly it begins being pushed back. The entire crystal vanished in an instant, leaving only a hollow island behind, as Mystigan arrives and explains that he managed to find large enough traces of anima to return things to how they were. Magnolia and Fairy Tail have been sent back to Earthland. I really wish we had been following some of Mystigan's story the entire time, because this kinda feels like it comes out of nowhere, which I'm noticing is becoming more of a trend over the last 2 arcs. There are a lot more convenient plot solutions, as opposed to foreshadowed and developed story. Regardless, he then turns to Lily and thanks him for saving him all those years ago, and says that he is happy that he could return the favor by protecting his home, which is when we find out that Mystigan was the Prince of Edolas. It's a very sweet and touching moment, bookended by Nightwalker firing a magical cannon straight through Lily's back. Mystigan tries to de-escalate things using his position as prince, but Faust calls him out, saying he is nothing but a traitor who ran off to Earthland to stop anima. He has no love for his son anymore and plans to take him out with everyone else using the Droma Anin, or the Dragon Knight, basically a giant mech shaped like a dragon that is completely immune to magic. In an instant, the Exceed are attacked and many are turned into Lacrima as the king launches an attack on Fairy Tail. Mistigan manages to bounce it back, but due to its magic immunity, it is completely undamaged. And as the machine emerges from the dust and the rubble, he lands a brutal shot on Mistigan, sending him flying and plummeting towards the earth. However, as has been the theme this arc, there is one type of magic that does work against the monster: dragon slaying magic. And so it is up to our trio of dragon slayers to take on this mechanical dragon, while everyone else is sent to protect the cats. Gajeel and Natsu go on the offensive while Wendy plays support to speed them up and make them even more powerful. Faust quickly realizes that Wendy is the main problem and begins targeting her, but Natsu manages to protect her, even managing to consume the explosions from Faust's rockets to power himself up. But he isn't the only one eating. While Natsu is protecting the support, Gajeel is going to town chomping on the dragon's tail. We have the advantage, but then the Dragon Knight changes color, becoming a deep black, and goes back on the offensive. As they fight, Mistigan is joined by Panther Lily, and the Urzas once again begin to battle, this time on the back of a legion of legions. As for the others, they plummet to the ground following Nightwalker's attacks, and are found by a squad of soldiers who are dead set on turning the last few Exceed into Lacrima, but Grey pretty easily keeps them safe. That is, until wave after wave of reinforcements arrive. Eventually, he and Lucy are overwhelmed and it looks like all hope is lost, until the entirety of Edolas' Fairy Tail Guild arrives to back them up. They finally got the message that if Earthland is fighting to protect them, they should probably be fighting too. That said, they have a very good reason to be fighting. To fuel the Dragon Knight armor, it must continuously drain magic from the entire world to stay active. Meanwhile, the Urzas launch their strongest attacks, only to break each other's weapons and armor, leaving them in a fist fight without magic. And this fight is fantastic. They are going at it on falling scraps of islands, and they just keep fighting like it's any other day. Nightwalker claims that she is fighting for people crying out without magic who want better lives, but our Urza convinces her that all that matters is that they are alive. It is more important that these people live with pride and love than it is for them to live with magic. Ultimately, the fight ends in a draw, though our Urza has won a moral victory. And we are almost done with the arc, so let me clear these last few chapters before getting into that, because their argument is basically the thesis for the entire arc, and I have a lot to say for it. But, speaking of things that are a bit fucky-wucky, Lily leads Mistigan to the anima control room, and our lad plans to reverse the anima, erasing Edolas so that it can't harm any other world again, which I guess proves that crazy runs in the family. With Nightwalker down, the last real threat is King Faust himself. This new form of his dragon armor is devastatingly powerful, and it's even fast enough to dodge a triple Dragon Slayer roar before launching a counterattack that leaves all three Slayers on the ground. But let's be real, these are fairy tale wizards. If there is one thing we know they can do, it's get back up. Natsu even calls out that if he is drained of all of his magic, he will simply pull on the magic that is meant for tomorrow, essentially saying he will drain his own life energy, his future, at the expense of keeping this fight going. I can only guess that Mashima was reading Hunter x Hunter when he got to this point. Not to be outdone though, Gajeel gets back up and locks the dragon onto the ground. Now that it can't escape, Wendy traps Natsu inside a Sky Dragon roar and sends him flying towards the enemy in one crazy combo attack that rips the king straight out of the armor. But the troubles aren't over yet. Mistigan has reversed anima, sending magic back to Earthland and causing all of the floating islands to come crashing down. It is truly a cataclysmic event as magic technology and weapons stop working. Fairy Tail had won the battle, but now the people of this world were completely without magic. Mistigan explains that he knows the world will fall into complete chaos, so they will need a hero and a villain to unify them. His final request as prince is for Lily to fulfill the role of Edolas' new king and to punish him for destroying their world. But that's a lot to put on someone, so Lily completely refuses. He says Mistigan can't simply put the world on the path to destruction and then die. It would be taking the easy way out. A conversation very similar to the one Urza had with Jellal, the parallel Mistigan, after he regained his memories and wanted to take his own life to atone for his mistakes. Instead, he needs to set it right himself by becoming king and then leading his people down the right path. And in exchange, Lily will become the villain. He was already someone who was exiled from the Exceed, and someone Faust's army had already attacked, meaning to the world he would be the perfect scapegoat. Scapecat, I guess. However, neither is willing to accept a world where the other is killed for doing their best to save Edolas. But an even greater fall guy has appeared, the demon god Dragoneel, who vows to steal all of Edolas' magic. He has even taken the king hostage along with his fearsome minions Red Fox and Marvel. He calls out to Mistigan, specifically naming him as the Prince of Edolas to let the populace know that he is rightfully the heir to the throne. Mistigan tries to put on a show to fight back, but as he does, the magic in his weapons is sucked through the anima, meaning that the prince will need to overcome his magical enemy without using magic himself, basically showing his people that this kingdom can survive without magic and that they can even be better for having lost it. Of course, Natsu doesn't just let Mistigan one-shot him, they go toe-to-toe and put on a very believable show for the audience. But unbeknownst to the citizens, they are having a private conversation that is exchanged with every hit. Natsu explains that this is now a fairy tale send-off party, and reminds Mistigan of the 3 rules for anyone who leaves the guild. These are the same ones that Urza told her friends at the end of the Tower of Heaven arc. Firstly, no passing on information that will incriminate Fairy Tail. Second, no contacting prior clients to make a profit. And third, even if he makes a mistake, he must go on living with all of his strength. He can never think of his own life as something small or worthless, and he must never forget the friends that he loves. In summary, you can't just give up your own life to be the villain for Edolas like you wanted. As the prince lands his final attack on Natsu, the anima kicks in and pulls all magical beings out of Edolas, including the remaining members of Fairy Tail and the Exceed like Lily. Edolas' Fairy Tail is worried that without magic, there will be no place for a wizard guild, but Gray just laughs at them, saying their guild is built on people, not magic. As long as they have friends, they can still have a guild. As everyone else vanishes, Mistigan calls to his people, declaring their victory and announcing that even without magic, humanity shall live on. As we return to Earthland, the Exceed Queen explains the truth of what happened 6 years ago. Back then, she received a vision of Extalia crashing into the ground, and they believed that it was humanity's fault. They knew that if they ever went to war with the humans, they would quickly be defeated, so instead they gathered 100 Exceed eggs and sent them to Earthland to escape their inevitable doom. But things changed with Carla. Like the Queen, she too has the power of foresight, but hers worked subconsciously, which messed with her memory, ultimately resulting in her believing that she had received orders which needed to be followed. I don't particularly like the idea of them going back on this sending orders thing, because it kind of messes with the idea of fate and free will that we had worked towards, as well as kind of taking the wind out of a lot of Happy's big monologues in this arc. There was a lot of big moments for his character where he was able to inspire Carla and build their relationship together, and now they're just like, actually, she wasn't under anyone's control the whole time, it was fine. So that's just kind of weird. Regardless, when Carla arrived in Extalia, Nadi and Nietzsche were told to play along with the idea of her being manipulated to avoid further chaos. As for why Carla has the same powers as the Queen, well, Happy and his secret father, whose name is Lucky by the way, mention how Carla and the Queen look, talk, and move the same, which means that Carla's lie about being the princess wasn't actually a lie. The Exceed decide to live not far from Magnolia, promising that they can be visited at any time now that they live so close. It is a very touching moment for both Carla and Happy's families, but unfortunately I don't think we ever hear from really any of them again, with the exception of like Nietzsche, Panther Lily, and I think Nadi. But speaking of Panther Lily, look at this little guy. His buff form was unsuited for Earthland, so he now has to conserve energy by shrinking down to the size of a normal cat. And now he wants to join the guild that his prince loved, officially becoming Gagio's partner. But he doesn't come empty-handed, as he has also captured a suspicious person, an Edolas wizard who shouldn't have been able to come across the Anima Gate normally. But in reality, the reason she was brought to Earthland is because this was her original home. As it turns out, our Lisana never actually died, she had simply been sent to Edolas. And Natsu's face when he sees her is pure shock. She leaps into his arms saying how happy she is to see the real him one more time. She explains that while she was unconscious after Elfman accidentally attacked her, she had been pulled through one of these smaller anima portals which Mystigan hadn't sealed. When she woke up, she was in Edolas where their Lysana had recently died. Everyone was so happy to see her that she couldn't bear to tell them the truth, so she just pretended to be Edolas' Lysana instead. This also meant that when Natsu and Happy arrived on Edolas, she needed to hide that she was their Lysana, because she couldn't break the hearts of the Edolas, Elfman, and Mira and put them through the pain of losing their sister again. However, when the anima began to absorb her a second time and pull her back into Earthland, her fake siblings just told her that they always felt like maybe she wasn't their actual sister, but could never put that feeling into words. And finally, they thanked her for trying so hard to keep them happy. And that brings us to her reunion with her real siblings. Elfman and Mira had left Magnolia to visit her grave, and we get this moment of pure disbelief and overwhelming bittersweetness as she runs up to hug them. It is a brutally sad moment and definitely got a few tears out of me. I love the Strauss family reunion, but it does leave me wondering who the fuck they buried in Lysana's grave. And if there was no body back then, why did they just assume she was dead? Like, I know Elfman was in a blind rage, but Mira should have known something was weird at least, right? It isn't like Elfman would have been able to hit her so hard she was vaporized. There should have been some trace of their sister, and even if they just assumed she went missing afterwards, or she ran away from the trauma of being attacked, like that would have been more understandable than believing she was dead. At least that's how I see it. It's just a little bit weird. It's not a big deal. More importantly though, this is one of the first real arcs where we are presented with a deeper discussion and meaning behind the story. I guess we also had the Oracion Seis arc, which talked about the balance between light and dark and how similar and different they really are, but that's a pretty generic and surface level discussion, especially in anime. I think this was a much deeper dive. A big theme in Edolas was talking about the ideas of class struggle, the haves and the have-nots, though rather than talking about money, we are working with magic. A kingdom which hoards magic for themselves, while those who live on the outskirts survive on scraps. At the same time, I think it gets a bit muddied when we bring in the Earthland Wizards, though. Specifically, we see that in the Urza's discussion. Our Urza suggests that magic doesn't really matter. All that matters is that people are able to keep on living. And like, yeah, that is a great message, and I would love for that to be true, but the person saying it comes from a world with unlimited magic. It would be like if Jeff Bezos came up to you and was like, hey champ, I know you're having a rough time and you're trying to make more money and support your family, but money doesn't matter. All that matters is your health and your loved ones. And yeah, that's great, but I fucking wish I didn't have to hear him saying it while riding a gold jet ski that he installed spinning rims on just because he fucking could, you know? I just think the argument is kind of idealistic and pretty disingenuous, at least on the greater scale. The only thing that really saves it is that our Urza genuinely believes it, right? It is how she sees the world. Her loved ones are more important to her than magic or money, but I think imposing that worldview onto someone who is currently in the process of losing their magic is kind of rough. On the other hand, we have a very similar moment from Grey that I think actually does a much better job at getting the message across, despite being way smaller and less focused on. When Edolas' fairy tale members are worried about their guild breaking apart when magic is gone, he reassures them saying that the guild isn't built on magic, it's built on people, and I think that works much better. But you might be saying that's the same argument that Urza had. How is it different? Well, that's because the concerns are different. In the Urza's case, Nightwalker is saying that she feels like life will be nearly impossible when magic is gone. And the reality is that life will be more difficult. Pleasantries and idealism isn't going to change that. However, in the guild's case, they aren't actually worried about losing magic. They're worried about losing each other. So the reminder that their friends aren't going anywhere when magic vanishes is directly tied to what they're looking to be reassured of. Bringing it back to that Bezos example, if I lose my job, I am worried that I can't support my family, and hearing, well, at least you still have your family, isn't going to help. Like, yeah, it's true, and I appreciate that. That's great, but I still am going to need to find a new way to protect them and support them, and until I can do that, I'm going to be super stressed out. On the other hand, let's say my friend group all decides that Magic the Gathering is getting too expensive, so we need to quit. Well, just because we aren't playing the game doesn't mean that we can't stay connected or find new things to do together. One response is a consolation, while the other is reassurance. The tone and the context make a massive difference between the two situations. Also, very brief side note, if you're interested in Magic, I also have a Magic the Gathering channel, which I will link in the description that you can go check out. Anyways, back to Fairy Tail. We also get into the morality of telling lies to keep peace in this arc. We both see it kind of work and kind of fall apart between Mistigan and the Queen. Overall, I think this arc introduces a lot of really interesting ideas at the surface level, but it doesn't really stick the landing with almost any of them when it comes to presenting the point. Like, Mashima did a line of coke, bursted into the room, and was like, "You guys ever think about the intricacies of class dynamics and the hoarding of the wealth by the elites? Anyways, I'm gonna go make a Hot Pocket." All the same, the arc is okay, but a lot of these little missteps definitely hold it back from being one that I particularly like, and it's probably one that I actually overlook a lot while looking back on Fairy Tail. But there was one thing that I was very disappointed in, though, and that is that we never got a payoff to some of the interesting character design elements. Using the name Faust and giving us a devil-like advisor and not making a reference to Faustian bargains of some kind just feels weird. I think the closest we got is that he had this suit of armor with unlimited power that drained the power of his own world, but that's stretching it. We literally could have just had a single conversation where Byro egged Faust on and convinced him that he had to exterminate the Exceed or something like that, especially when there is so much attention that has been brought to character design throughout the rest of the series. Like, you don't randomly land on the name Faust, and I think that's just like a bit of extra salt in the wounds. But overall, not a terrible arc. But that brings us to the final arc which we're covering in today's video, the Tenrou Island arc, which opens with a black-haired boy laying in a forest surrounded by wildlife and lamenting what a sad sky he sees above him. Soon after, he is approached by a pack of wolves, but as they come close to him, they all die one after another. But it isn't just them. The birds fall from the sky, the forest begins to rot, everything around this man dies in an instant. The man says he is sorry and that he never wanted to take anyone's life, but the world rejects him. More importantly, he mentions how he hopes he will see Natsu soon. While we are here, we can briefly talk about some of his design elements, though. Obviously, we have a very heavy black and white theme going on. It brings with it a sense of balance, though the black is definitely dominant, which is in line with being surrounded by death. In general, his clothes feel ancient, almost sage-like, but he also wears a ring on his necklace, with rings often being a symbol of some kind of promise, leaving us with a possible question: did he make some kind of promise to Natsu? He is a problem for later, though. For now, we can return to Fairy Tail, where everyone is celebrating having Lisana back. Well, everyone except Juvia. She heard that Edolas Grey loved their version of Juvia and assumed that it was because of her hair, so she has reverted to her old costume design. Lily is also trying to find his bearings in the guild, which he does through Urza being a familiar face, and overall things return to normal. Of course, being marked by a giant guild-wide brawl just like our first time here. Meanwhile, the council has a mountain of paperwork all blaming Fairy Tail with one problem or another. Many of the members believe that they should go easy on the guild since they dealt with the Oracion Seis, but others are more worried about them being friends with Jellal. Ultimately, the new chairman, Grandoma, declares that if they cause one more problem, the guild will be disbanded. Now, it wouldn't be a new arc without someone showing up in Lucy's house, though, and this time it is Kana, who appears in her bathtub as Lucy is showering. Kana first asks Lucy about how her relationship with her father has been lately, and then tells her that she is thinking of quitting the guild. Lucy is pretty shocked by this, since Kana has been in Fairy Tail longer than anyone else their age. But when she tells Mira about it, we learn that this happens every year around this time. Kana isn't the only one acting weird, though. Everyone in the guild is in a sudden panic to pick up jobs as quickly as possible, with the exception of Urza, who is sparring with Lily. And look how happy this cat is to be fighting her. The reason that everyone else is acting strange, though, is that Makarov is about to announce the wizards eligible to take the S-Class qualification test, which is great considering we just lost both Laxus and Mistigan, leaving only Mira, who is still getting over her anxiety with using magic, Gildarts, who is rarely around, and Urza, who, to be fair, is Urza. The test will take place on Fairy Tail's sacred ground, Sirius Island, and only 8 wizards will be taking it, those being Natsu, Grey, Juvia, Elfman, Kana, Freed, Levy, and Mest. Now, a couple of things here. Firstly, when we were introduced to Phantom Lord's Element 4, we were told that they were all S-Class wizards. So why isn't Juvia S-Class anymore? Did she, lose her rank when swapping guilds? We don't really get an answer to that here. Second, Elfman? Really? Elfman? I mean, sure, he's kind of strong when he can manage to get his shit together, but even as newer members, Lucy or Gajiel should have been in this spot 100%. Levy is also kind of a weird pick as well, but it implies that we are looking for more than just the power of the wizard, as she was also super helpful in the battle for Fairy Tail without actually getting involved in the battle directly. But even bigger than any of those questions is, who the fuck is Mest? We have never heard of this character before, and suddenly they are ready to take the S-Class exam. The test will take place in 1 week, and only one person is allowed to pass. However, Carla suddenly gets a vision of the future. Since becoming aware of her magic, she has gained more control over it, but this time when she looks ahead, she sees Kana breaking down in tears, Natsu looking terrified, a hand laid out on the floor, and finally the boy from the forest. So the only rules given so far are 1, everyone must choose a partner for this test, and 2, that partner can't be an S-Class wizard. The only other information we have is that Urza, Mira, and Guildarts will be obstacles on the test. For now, we have a week to prepare. So let's talk partners. Natsu picks Happy, which, while cute, has gotta be objectively wrong here, right? I just feel like there's better options. Gray goes with Loki to form Team Fuckboy, Juvia and Lisana are together, Elfman and Evergreen, Levy and Gajiel, which, by the way, just a reminder, he did crucify her not that long ago. Of course, since then, he has stood up for her and protected her and the other guild members, so I guess we are past that. The two do make a great team though. Gajiel is all the muscle, while Levy is all the brains and support. And finally, we learn a little bit about Mest when he is approached by Wendy. Apparently, he was Mistigan's disciple, which would explain why we haven't seen him. I mean, we barely saw Mistigan. But it still feels very weird to be introducing a potential S-rank guild member at this point. The only person we don't know the partner of is Freed, but we can assume that it's Bixlow because Evergreen is with Elfman and Bixlow is the last member of the Thunder Legion. Now, finally, Lucy finds Kana passed out drunk in the snow, brings her back to her house, and the two of them talk for a little bit. The reason why Kana was so depressed earlier is because this will be her 5th time taking this test, making her the only 4-time failure. Now, to be fair, if only one wizard passes each year, then the previous competition was likely Mistigan, Laxus, Urza, and Mira. We know Kana is pretty capable after seeing her defend Fairy Tail from Phantom Lord, but that is some crazy competition to hold yourself up against. The bigger issue, though, is that Kana feels like she needs to become an S-Class wizard to earn the right to talk to someone. We don't find out who that is here, but when Lucy hears this, they both start crying, and she vows to help Kana become an S-Class wizard. The only real context clue that we have at this point to decipher what Kana was talking about is that whoever she is looking to talk to is a man, and the last time she came to Lucy, she was looking to talk to Lucy about her relationship with her dad, so we might be able to assume she needs to become an S-rank wizard to feel worthy of approaching her dad. Though again, we don't have much to go off at this point, but the seeds are there. Soon after, we embark on a ship to Sirius Island, and it is super hot in this region, so naturally, Gray is here, schlangin' wang. Fellas, this is 203 chapters in, and it is the first time that we are getting this level of male fan service, which is essentially the average level of female fan service at this point in the story. We get this shit every arc for women. There's simply no argument that both are done to the same level. So before you get in the comments and say, oh, they do fan service for everyone. They do, but come on, let's be real here. Either way, let's talk about Wendy's cutthroatness. She's not even curing Natsu of his seasickness because they are enemies on this mission, which is kind of funny. Luckily, we soon reach Sirius Island, a pretty small forested place with one towering tree that's branches create what is essentially a second island far up in the air. Makarov explains that there's a legend that fairies once lived on this island, and that the first guild master, Mavis Vermilion, was laid to rest here. He then goes on to describe how the first round of the competition will happen. Basically, every group is supposed to rush to a stream of smoke on the island, and then choose one of 8 paths. 3 of those paths will lead to a battle with a current S-Class wizard, 2 pairs of paths will lead to a battle between the test takers, and 1 path will be completely peaceful. This first round is to test the wizard's combat strength and their luck. With all that said, the S-Class qualifications have officially begun. While everyone else is stuck on the boat, Happy and Natsu try to fly ahead to get a lead, only to bump into one of Freed's barriers. But with Levi on the boat, the barrier is quickly dropped for her and Gajiel. Evergreen apparently also has a knack for undoing Freed's simpler spells, so her and Elfman are free to go as well, leaving everyone else to wait 5 more minutes until the barrier dissolves naturally. By the time Natsu arrives, 4 of the paths have already been sealed, and he makes the insane choice to go down path E, hoping to find Urza and prove his strength. The last to arrive at the paths is Team Kana, who are forced to pick the path leading to Freed and Bixlow. As a reminder, Kana got beat by Freed in the past, while Lucy needed Loki to beat Bixlow, and he is off her roster for this competition. Freed begins by asking Kana and Lucy to put more clothes on since it would be distracting for him otherwise, but Kana leans into it, using her cards to summon a bunch of sexy girls, I guess. On the one hand, kinda weird that only the women remained in their swimsuits. On the other, kinda fun that Kana can use sexuality to take advantage of Freed, being this awkward perv. As Bixlow's babies attack, Kana creates a water-based attack from her cards, which lets Lucy summon Aquarius, basically one-shotting both Bixlow and Freed, a surprisingly easy win for Team Kana. But there's a reason it's so surprising. Freed and Bixlow threw the fight. Freed explains that he owes a debt to those two specifically, so he allowed them to win. He doesn't really even care about becoming an S-Class wizard anyways, he just wants Fairy Tail to remain Fairy Tail so that Laxus can return to it one day. As for Natsu, he doesn't come across Urza, he finds the only person even more dangerous, Gildarts. We very quickly see why everyone says Gildarts is the strongest. Natsu is giving it his all, and Gildarts is just kinda effortlessly swatting him away. Even when Natsu lands a punch, Gildarts will catch it and then crumble the ground beneath his own feet to soften the blow. Natsu even goes so far as to use Fire Dragon's Roar, and Gildarts just bursts the attack and Natsu into pieces. We've seen Natsu get beaten before, it happens almost every other arc, but we have never seen someone toy with him while also actively holding back and not trying to hurt him. But even once he's been separated into a ton of mini Natsus, he still tries to keep fighting. As these little guys, Natsu is actually so chaotic that he manages to land some kind of attacks, but even so it's completely ineffective. However, as far as Natsu's concerned, he's already won, because for the first time ever, Gildarts was forced to move from where he was standing in a fight between them. We take the little victories where we can get them. Ultimately though, Gildarts offers to pass Natsu after seeing how much he's grown, but Natsu refuses, saying that unless he can actually beat Gildarts, becoming an S-Class wizard won't have any value to it, it's not real. And unfortunately, this is specifically what Gildarts is trying to show Natsu. His greatest weakness is that he refuses to acknowledge when he is in over his head, and sure, it works out most of the time, but that doesn't mean it will always work out. This being something that Gildarts himself just had to learn against the Black Dragon who took his arm and his leg. He doesn't want Natsu to fall prey to that same over-ambition and eagerness to fight, and to demonstrate that point, he releases his full magical energy, a force so strong it hits the island like an earthquake and forces Natsu to his knees. The guy wants to fight back, he wants to attack, but his body just won't let him. This is what it means to face a completely overwhelming and impossibly strong enemy. Having made his point, Gildarts still passes Natsu, but leaves him with some words of encouragement and wisdom. He will never look down on those brave enough to stand and fight their enemies, but he respects those who are brave enough to put their sword away just as much. Fear isn't evil, neither is acknowledging your own weakness. In fact, that is the first step to becoming stronger. But at the same time, he understands that gotta win feeling and says that regardless of age and experience, he's still the exact same way. What I love about this is that it kind of sets up a boundary for the power system. Up until now, we've been dealing with people more or less on similar tiers. Like if Urza is an 8, Natsu is like a 6, and most people we've come across are kind of in that like 4 to 9 range, with maybe a few stragglers, but on average, that's what we're looking at, right? But as we've seen, things like emotional state, strength of will, determination, all of that can combine to make someone unbelievably stronger, to the point where Natsu can go toe-to-toe with people like Laxus, kinda. But the introduction of guild arts lets us know that we've had a huge misconception about the series. We have assumed that it has been a 0 to 10 scale, but guild arts comes in and says, hey, by the way, I'm a 35, and I just got my ass beat. It does not matter how passionate or determined Natsu is, this is just an insurmountable wall, and he needs to be able to both understand and recognize that. Over in Juvia and Lisana's fight, and they get booty blasted by Urza in this gorgeous looking aqua armor. They do all they can. We get to see Lisana's magic, which is also transformation just like her siblings, though she does things like cats and harpies. But overall, I mean, it's Urza. They didn't really have a chance. Speaking of Lisana's siblings though, Elfman and Ever are fighting against Mirajane. Meanwhile, Carla and Lily have flown to Sirius Island to watch over the test, and we also get a look back at Mest and Wendy's meeting, and the dude is just fucking strange. We see him making weird faces while trying to taste snow, then jumping into a freezing river to see what it's like. But despite him being weird, Wendy chose to work with him against Carla's concerns. Lily is also worried about Mest, this dude who was apparently the prince's disciple but that no one seems to know. On top of that, Mistigan actively avoided contact with others while he was on Earthland. If you remember, he even put his own guild to sleep so that they wouldn't see him. Lily is so flustered by this that he questions if Mest is even in the guild at all. Making things even weirder, he puts up such a bad fight against Gray and Loki that he gets one shot off screen. Begging the question again, who the fuck is this guy and why is he here? Gray even comments on this, saying that he thinks Mest used to be stronger, but he just can't seem to remember him. He doesn't even know if they have fought in the past or not. He knows that Mest made it far in the test last time, but he can't remember who he partnered with. Even Loki says that all of his memories of Mest are also pretty vague. But this conversation is cut short as they come across Team Kana, Team Natsu, as well as Team Levi, who had the peaceful route, by the way. Finally, Elfman and Evergreen show up, super wounded, and say that they beat Mira by taking advantage of a momentary distraction that they can't talk about as a man. These are our 5 teams which will make it to round 2, but something more sinister might be happening. Mest tells Wendy that this island is usually hidden because of powerful magic wards, which are meant to make it impossible to find because Fairy Tail has hidden its greatest secret here. He then asks if Wendy wants to investigate this together before making this face. They aren't the only ones searching though, as round 2 will be a search for Mavis's grave with a 6-hour limit. This wouldn't be such a big deal, but the island is crawling with giant monsters. The grave could be just about anywhere, so Natsu decides to climb to the top of the island and see if she is hidden up there. Meanwhile, Urza and Mira are cooking a meal for everyone who's finished, and Mira explains that Elfman had said he was going to marry Evergreen, which shocked her so much that they managed to take her out. This was probably a battle strategy, but she still can't help but imagine what their kid would look like. Also, Juvia and Lisana are with them, and they talk about how Wendy and Mest are late, and how it's weird how Edolas didn't have a Mest, and how no one can remember when he joined the guild, and are we laying it on thick enough yet? I do kind of wish that it wasn't laid this thick, because like if one person and maybe Lily or Lisana put the clues together, that could have led to an awesome reveal, but at this point, just about everyone but Natsu has mentioned the Mest mystery. Either way, Juvia and Urza are going to go look for them, and to make sure that Wendy is okay. As for Freed and Bixlow, they return to the guild with guild arts. To me, this decision to take these 3 members off of the island reads like the end of the battle for Fairy Tail, where Makarov had a medical issue out of nowhere to stop him from participating in the fight. Essentially, if we are quickly removing guild arts like this, something bad is about to happen. Speaking of which, as Evergreen and Elfman are flirting in the forest, they are approached by a boy wearing black. Also, when I talked about this character's design earlier, I mentioned that his necklace had a ring on it. I can't quite tell in the manga if it's a ring or a locket, but either way, it still ties him to someone else. Regardless, the boy is surprised to see anyone else is here since he came to the island hoping he wouldn't come across other people. And remember, this island is supposed to be hidden. Only Fairy Tail members are supposed to be able to be here. Seeing this outsider, Elfman is about to charge him, but the boy holds up his hand and says that he will leave, begging them to not get any closer to him. But in the next moment, he seems to get a headache and he starts talking about the predator of death coming. Suddenly, the boy is enveloped in a black magic that sends waves out all around him, killing everything that it touches, with Evergreen and Elfman only surviving because Natsu dove in to hold them down below it. As the boy sees Natsu, he recognizes him immediately and begins to cry. The boy says Natsu has grown a lot and that he's been looking for him, which is creepy as hell, so Natsu rushes at him and throws him, only for the boy to flip over and land on his feet. The boy then thinks to himself, I don't want to kill anyone else, and the only one here who can stop me is Natsu, but he can't do it yet. He continues to cry as he is overwhelmed by emotion, and yet again a black wave gets released. But this time when it ends, the boy has vanished, and for some reason, Natsu's scarf has turned completely black. Knowing how the black waves work and knowing that Natsu was given the scarf by Igneal to protect him, I'd assume the only reason Natsu is alive after being 10 feet away from him when the wave went off is that the scarf saved him in some way, but again, just an assumption. For now, all that matters is that the boy is gone. As for Mest, he looks up into the sky to see Grimoire Hearts' guild ship flying overhead. Inside, Ultear tells Master Hades that the time has come, and that finally he has been revived. That man who descended to ancient ground, mastered the black arts, birthed tens of thousands of demons, and pulled the world into chaos. The most evil and powerful force in the history of the magic world, Zeref the Black Wizard, is here. With that, we finally know the boy in black's name, and we are left with so many more questions and things to tie to him. This was the wizard who created both Lullaby and Deliora, so we've been hearing his name for a while now, but more importantly, how is this ancient black wizard tied to Natsu? Why does he know him if he's been asleep for so long? Does that have anything to do with the fact that all of the Dragon Slayers appear to be much older than they should be? How does this tie into the dragons and their disappearances? The questions just keep coming, but for now they will have to wait as Hades' Dark Guild sets course for the Fairy Island. Hades talks about having the keys to awaken the sleeping darkness in Zeref, and then we quickly get a look at his guild. First up, we have seen and met Ultear before. She was the one who drove Jellal crazy, and the one who tried to revive Deliora. Next, we have Zancro, a guy who kinda looks like a more feral Natsu, who also uses fire magic. A butler goat named Caprico, definitely not short for Capricorn, and definitely not a celestial spirit. Except, oops, the volume notes call him Capricorn. Rusty Rose, a hopeless romantic fuckboy who feels like the sweet spot between Grey and Loki. Kane Hikaru, a large, fat dude who talks too quickly and gets overly excited. And Merudi, a girl with wing caps over her ears who seems to blankly repeat whatever she is told. Of all their designs, hers is the only particularly interesting one to me. The wings scream speed and wind, which are concepts related to freedom, something that seems antithetical to someone who is emotionally blank like she seems to be. Of course, leading them all is Hades, who kinda looks like you brought a 10-year-old to Spirit Halloween and told them to make someone look evil. He's got the classic evil wizard beard, an eye patch, and horns that look kinda similar to Loki's in Norse myth. All while having the name Hades, which is obviously tied to the underworld and death. Anyways, until they arrive, we are looking for the grave. Kana and Lucy try to solve the riddle which was given to the contestants. Gray tries to cheat by following them, and Gajiel pisses Levy off by calling her small and weak while patting her on the head. While this is kinda funny and cute, it ends up being a pretty big disaster as she ends up storming off and gets ambushed by a bird ninja and a samurai. But luckily Gajiel arrives to protect her. These guys, named Yomizu and Kawazu, work for Grimoire Heart, and are here to hunt fairy tale wizards. Yomizu actually has magic similar to Levy, which is pretty cool. His sword slashes create kanji that produce different effects. First, he creates a deafeningly loud sound, which forces Gajiel to cover his ears, which allows Kawazu to attack from behind by shooting eggs at him and Levy, I guess. There's definitely one set of powers that is way cooler than the other here. Levy actually steals the show in this fight, negating the loud sound by using silent, then frying the eggs with fire. But when the samurai manages to cut Gajiel and leaves him struggling to stand, Gajiel orders Levi to run away and warn the others while he holds them off. Of course, before she leaves, she creates iron for Gajiel to consume and power up. She is like the ultimate support and versatility wizard, and I absolutely love getting to see her in action. It is such cool magic, and I wish it was present in the story more often. I know she does get more action going forward, but it still feels like we don't get to see her enough. With this iron though, Gajiel is ready for the fight again, and I love that he is the first defense against this new war on Fairy Tail, considering he was so involved in Phantom Lord's war on Fairy Tail. He even thinks back to Natsu in that moment and warns his opponents that he will feel the same pain as he did back then. Levi quickly finds her way to Juvia and Urza as Gajiel continues to fight 1v2, and we actually get a look back at how Gajiel joined the guild. Makarov approached him after the battle with Phantom Lord, shortly after Juvia joined. He tells Gajiel that there are people who like to be alone, but no single person can handle true isolation. Gajiel is of course hesitant to join after what he did to the guild and its members, and Makarov really shines here, saying that all of that is in the past. He absolutely cannot forgive him for hurting his children, he makes that clear, but at the same time he refuses to sit and watch as a young wizard falls to darkness when he has the opportunity to extend a hand and help them. He directly says that he isn't trying to save Gajiel, he's just trying to show him a potential path forward that he might not be looking at. It's completely up to him if he's going to choose to take that path or not. It kind of reminds me of the second chapter where Makao was missing, and rather than telling Natsu to go and save him, he lets Natsu make that choice himself. In the same way, he isn't telling Gajiel what to do, he's just offering him a different life than the one he is living. And Gajiel apparently responded to that, as he is proudly declaring that he is a fairy tale wizard before taking out both of his enemies in one massive attack. Just as he finishes, Urza, Levi, and Juvia arrive, but they aren't the only ones. Hades' 7 kin of purgatory also show up as well, something which confuses Makarov, as only fairy tale members should be allowed in this place. But notably, we've only seen 6 of the 7 kin of purgatory. Urza interrogates one of the enemies Gajiel defeated to learn that the invaders are here to find Zeref, who they explain is 400 years old. Actually, he says it twice for some reason, and naturally, Urza immediately connects this to Jellal and the Tower of Heaven. Now, of note, this idea of 400 years is popping up again. It is the same time period where the war around Nirvana was fought. This guy goes on to say that one of these 7 kin has already been on the island, with it being heavily suggested that it is Mest, though he also seems surprised that Grimoire Heart is here. And speaking of which, Carla and Lily arrive to confront him, but he teleports and grabs Wendy. And you know what? Actually a pretty decent fake out here, as one of the trees starts growing a face and announces that he is Azuma of Grimoire Heart. But it isn't like Mest is totally innocent. He's actually an agent working for the council who was sent to keep an eye on Fairy Tail and find an excuse to shut them down. For now, that mission is gonna have to be put on the back burner though, because if he can shut down Grimoire Heart, then it will be even better for his career. Luckily, he brought a whole battleship of council soldiers to support him, and immediately, Azuma blows it up and they are dead. So that's probably not gonna be great for his career. Oops. But let's talk Azuma though, because his design is super fucking cool. He has this kind of classic soldier design that feels almost medieval, while at the same time he has a really soft look to him. Everything about him kind of screams stoic but honorable. This battle falls to Lily, which is kinda strange since usually the cats are on the sideline, but without his sword he's in a rough spot. Azuma, aside from merging with trees, is also able to produce explosions, which makes him pretty difficult to deal with. But Lily isn't alone. Wendy gives him a speed boost, and that helps to even the odds. It doesn't last for long though, as in an instant, Azuma creates a massive explosion pillar, which takes down Lily, Mest, and Wendy in no time at all. As for the other members of the 7, they are getting ready to enter battles as well, though Ultear has a new costume with a big clock on her stomach that looks like absolute ass. As Grimoire Heart approaches, they find a truly gigantic Makarov blocking their path. As he stands before them, he thinks back to 48 years ago when he was told to be the 3rd master of Fairy Tail. Back then, he refused, saying it wasn't his style, but the bearded 2nd master, who is clearly Hades, talked him into it and entrusted him with the position. Just like Phantom Lord's Guildhall, the Grimoire Heart's ship has a Jupiter cannon equipped to it, which they fire into Makarov, taking him down, but before he drops, he manages to tear apart a huge portion of the ship. This is ultimately for naught, though, as Ultear is on board and simply turns back time to the point where the ship was in good condition again. With this opening, Caprico takes all of their minions and flies down towards the island. Makarov quickly realizes that it is do or die, and so he enacts fairy law to try and take out all of his enemies at once. Meanwhile, Natsu is shaking mess to get information out of him until he learns that he is from the council, and then Natsu's tone immediately changes as he compliments his coat. But suddenly, Caprico starts dropping Grimoire's entire army to the ground from the sky as countless little bubbles. When they pop, enemies surround Fairy Tail in every direction. But we have Makarov's fairy law coming, right? So this really shouldn't be a problem. But that hopeful idea is quickly put to the side when Hades uses Grimoire law to cancel the attack out. This ultimately proves to Makarov that Hades is in fact Precht, the second master of Fairy Tail. And this is also why they were able to find Sirius Island in the first place. They had someone with insider knowledge. In Makarov's shock, Hades grabs him with his chains, reverting him to his smaller form and whipping him towards the island. The Masters begin to fight, but Hades completely dominates things with his Amaterasu magic, which sends out these insanely powerful shockwaves. As they battle, Hades explains that he learned that magic was born from darkness, which is why it became feared and persecuted. It eventually became a part of everyday life, but Hades wanted to learn more about what this mysterious dark origin was. To that end, he left the guild in search of any and all information he could, which ultimately led him to Zeref. Makarov manages to get to his feet one more time to try and attack, but when he does, Hades blasts a hole through his chest, leaving him on the ground alone to die. As his consciousness begins to fade, he prays that his will reaches the person meant to succeed him as the next master of Fairy Tail. And as he sends those thoughts into the world, somewhere far, far away, an unsettling feeling finds its way to Laxus. Luckily, most of the fodder enemies that Caprico drops are, well, fodder, and even Happy can take care of some of them. In fact, they are so weak that one of the kin members, Zancro, burns a bunch of them to ashes. But hey, he uses fire, so it should be a pretty easy fight for Natsu. We've seen this before dozens of times. However, for the first time, that isn't the case. He uses these black flames belonging to lost magic, even more powerful than Dragon Slayer magic. Zancro is a fire god slayer. Our next battle, though, is going to be between Caprico and Lucy's group of herself, Kana, Loki, and Gray. Urza and Juvia come across Meridi, Elfman and Evergreen are paired with Rusty Rose, and Azuma finds his way to Mira Jane and Lisana. The final two members, Kane and Ultear, aren't in conflict yet. Kane is all alone in the forest, while Ultear is searching for Zeref. As Hades explains, he trained each of the 7 members in Lost Magic, making them incredibly powerful and deadly opponents. Natsu points out a difference, though. While he was taught by a dragon, Zancro was not taught by a god, despite the name Hades. What remains to be true, though, is that Zancro is just on another level. While Natsu can't consume his fire without experiencing crazy pain, Zancro can eat Natsu's, which puts our boy at an immediate disadvantage. Even the fire dragon's roar gets swallowed up and repurposed into a fire god roar, which completely knocks Natsu onto his ass. And the others aren't doing any better. For example, Caprico is holding control over his fight despite it being 4 against 1. But Natsu actually ended up getting knocked so far away that he finds Makarov bleeding out on the floor. He rushes to the master's side, and for the first time, Makarov does not have faith in his guild. He says that Fairy Tail has no chance of winning this battle and even begs Natsu to take everyone and run, echoing Gildarts' words saying that there are times that you must retreat. And for his part, Natsu actually takes a moment to think things over. He recognizes that he is afraid right now, but as he looks at his opponent, he decides that despite that fear, it isn't the kind of fear that Gildarts was talking about. Zancro is strong, don't get me wrong, but he is no Gildarts. What Natsu is actually afraid of is that someone else will reach Hades first, and he won't be able to beat the bastard who did this to Makarov. Absolutely banger scene. That said, I have conflicting feelings about this. We just spent time with Natsu learning this lesson, so it would be cool for him to find someone that he recognizes as an impossible threat, but at the same time, still being able to see a stronger opponent and understand that it doesn't mean that he has lost, despite that lesson, is also important. That's Natsu's whole thing, overcoming the odds and winning a battle. That's why Guildarts had to teach him the lesson to begin with, but it's important to know when to apply that lesson and when to still be Natsu Dragneel. The battle kicks up again and Natsu is doing better, but he's still on the back foot. He ends up being engulfed in black flames that start to tear his body apart. However, Makarov intervenes. He extends his hand to grab Zancro, shouting that he won't allow his children to be harmed in front of him. But grabbing a fire wizard isn't exactly the best idea. Zancro coats himself in flames, burning Makarov's hands, but the old man refuses to let go. And if this senior citizen on his deathbed can do the impossible, then so can Natsu. With a burst of energy, he releases every bit of magic in his body, becoming an empty vessel that he believes can take in the black flames. This time, it is Zancro who empowers Natsu's attack when he returns the favor, and the first of the 7 kin of Purgatory goes down. And I'll be honest, this is a bit of a weird takedown, only really explained by him saying that some fire has a trick to eating it. We've seen similar effects from eating other types of magic when he consumed Ether Nano. It's not exactly the same, but the idea is loosely connected enough that I can give it a pass. Still, definitely not a flawless moment though. With his enemy defeated, Natsu tells Makarov that he understands not all battles are winnable and that sometimes you need to retreat, but this isn't one of those moments. Despite this message, Natsu himself is pretty exhausted at this point and collapses. But how are the other fights going? Well, Azuma is completely dunking on Mira and Lisana, though he admits that he can't give a real effort fighting against women or children. At the same time, Mira is still pretty exhausted from using her takeover magic earlier, so she can't even transform here. But Azuma wants to fight a demon, so he gives her motivation, trapping Lisana in, I guess, a tree bomb, and explaining that it will go off in 3 minutes if he isn't defeated. This is just enough to get Mira going again, even if it's just for a short time. However, despite all of her effort, she can't even begin to overpower Azuma, so instead, with just moments left on the clock, she dives towards Lisana, hugs her, and takes the full force of the explosion to ensure that she doesn't lose her sister for a second time. As for Ultear, she finally manages to find Zeref. She is overwhelmed with joy, but he just looks right through her, saying, "I see, you're the one sowing the seeds of war, right? It is a sad thing to make me angry." As he finishes talking, an immense wave of magic is released, and immediately, Zeref is such an interesting character to me. He seems to kill anything around himself, claiming that he is being rejected by the world. He's supposed to be 400 years old, which shouldn't be a thing, so maybe we can assume this immortality or this prolonged life is tied to that imbalance with nature. It could be the reason or consequence of the world rejecting him. On top of all of that, he's supposed to be this dark, evil wizard, but he seems to hate violence. He does all he can to avoid other people, to keep his distance so he doesn't hurt anyone. We have this ultimate evil, but he seems to have a heart of gold. And speaking of heart of gold, Wendy manages to find the Master and Natsu, but her healing magic isn't working on either of them. In Makarov's case, his wounds are just too deep, while Natsu is just straight up unaffected by the healing for some reason. Makarov asks her to ignore him and instead to try and turn Natsu's scarf back to normal because he believes that Zeref's influence is interfering with her magic. As for Zeref himself, Ultear is still trying to win him over, but he tells her that he doesn't intend to act in this age and doesn't want to see war or death. He then demands the attack be stopped and that Grimoire Heart leaves the island. Ultear effectively takes this to mean that he is still asleep and unaware of his true self. He ends up getting so angered by her presence that he actually attacks her, but using the Arc of Time, she subdues him in this weakened state. Over to Rusty Rose, who is using what essentially looks like a mechanical version of Elfman's transformation magic as a summon to attack. Elfman and Evergreen go on the defensive since, and I quote, "he is wearing glasses so she can't turn him to stone." What an absurd weakness to this power. Like, I get Urza being resistant because she has a fake or magical eye, sure, but like, just normal glasses is her weakness? Shit, apparently I could have taken her out in the battle for Fairy Tail. They ultimately decide that his magic is like Lucy's, meaning that he is probably summoning creatures, which are pretty strong, but he himself should be weak. But that isn't the case, as he seems to also be able to transform his own body as well. Between Rusty and Caprico's exposition, we learn that Grimoire Heart is planning to use Zeref to purge the world of all non-magical people, completing something that they call the Great Magic World. And so I guess we've officially entered the Genocide arc. Now this idea might be strange to you, because the whole Edolas arc seemed to imply that most people in Earthland had some kind of magic, but apparently while Earthland is full of magic, only about 10% of people in the world are wizards. The other 90% have no magic powers for themselves. This feels kind of weird given the past arc, but I guess we are rolling with it. And honestly guys, I'll say it, this racist Rusty Rose guy, not very cash money if you ask me. Anyways, Elfman tells him to stop doing a racism, then grabs his monster arm and uses it to create new takeover magic, allowing him to fight on even footing. So now Rusty has to make a shield in his other hand, but with both arms being used, Elfman yoinks his glasses like a third grade bully, and Evergreen uses her magic to turn him into stone. But oops. The dude has the power to create glasses, as many as he wants. More specifically, he has incarnation magic, which can produce anything he wishes for, which he demonstrates by creating the Tower of Dingir. For those who haven't brushed up on their ancient Sumerian, this is a word referring to gods and goddesses, keeping in line with the god-slaying magic we saw from Zancro and Hades' name. Elfman and Evergreen have actually shown a ton of respect for each other throughout this fight, and she seems to have really warmed up to him since the battle for Fairy Tail, even apologizing as she feels responsible for holding him back from becoming an S-class wizard. But this sweet moment is brought to an end when the tower explodes with both of them stuck inside it. This is about when Natsu wakes up now that his scarf has been returned to normal, and right away he picks up a familiar scent, connecting it to the wizard Zalti from Galuna Island and rushing towards them. In all the chaos, Mest returns to the council soldiers where he finds Lahar, and where we find that his real name is Doranbolt. After being briefed on the situation, Lahar is nervous that Grimoire Hearts, Fairy Tail, and Zeref are all in one place, which could lead to the new council chairman being willing to use Aetherion to wipe them all out at once, since he considers these to be the greatest threats to Fiore. And noticeably, Doranbolt is hesitant to report things, knowing that Fairy Tail will be lumped with these great evils. Over with Caprico, and Loki tells the others that he will take him on alone, since there are 6 other members of his group that need to be dealt with. They can't afford to be going 4 against 1. The real reason that he feels that he specifically can beat Caprico, though, is that Caprico uses the lost human subjugation magic. This essentially reduces humanity's magic and strength, but for a celestial spirit, it shouldn't have any effect. Not only that, but he announces that Caprico is actually Capricorn, the celestial spirit. Gasp, shock, Superman was Clark Kent the whole time. Lucy seems to want to stay and help, but Loki refuses. As one final command before she goes, though, she orders that Loki wins this battle and returns to her. And when she does, Caprico takes special notice of her. Now, Loki and Capricorn actually have a very unique thing in common. Loki had lived in the human world for 3 years, while Capricorn has been here for 17 years. Keep in mind, 3 was nearly enough to kill Loki. But Capricorn hates humanity and acts as their master rather than being subservient to them. Something he shows off by summoning human heroes from the past that he has collected over time. He is an anti-celestial spirit. Loki ordered Lucy to leave because Layla Heartfilia was Capricorn's former master, and he is furious when he realizes that. Loki learned from Crux that Capricorn formed a contract with Layla 20 years ago, and this is his most recent contract. However, Capricorn explains how he managed to survive without a human summoner all this time. A person apparently used some forbidden magic to merge his body with Capricorn's to gain all of his power, basically stealing the spirit's body in the process. That said, he really dislikes being a goat, so the next natural step is to steal Loki's body instead. Loki goes in to attack, but as he does, the spirit inside of Capricorn jumps into his body, and he is thrilled to finally have a human host. Now all he has to do is kill Lucy, and he will be completely free. But in leaving Capricorn's body, the goat was now set free, and he calls the spirit's real name, forcing him out of Loki's body and freeing them both. Now that they're safe, Capricorn explains that 20 years ago, Layla had a physical breakdown that forced her to stop being a wizard, so her spirits, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Cancer, were given to her employees. Capricorn's key was given to a man named Zoldio, because look how trustworthy this guy looks. And he was meant to pass the key back to Lucy if she developed magic herself. However, Zoldio became corrupted and took over Capricorn's body instead. But now that the spirit is free, he is excited to work for Lucy as intended. With that, both spirits return to the celestial world, and their keys appear in Lucy's possession. And Gray is officially out of the S-Class test because he doesn't have a partner, though that probably isn't super relevant at this point. Chasing the smell of Zalti, Natsu finds his way to Zeref once again, but he's out of commission. So instead, we get a fight with Ultear, in which she creates a swarm of crystal balls with parallel universes inside of them, each with a different future. She launches each of them towards Natsu in a brutal-looking attack, but he's not the only one going through it. Gajil, Mira, Evergreen, and Elfman are all at the base camp, recovering as Lysana and Levi watch over them. As for Lucy and Kana, they have returned to searching for Mavis's grave, and Lucy comes up with a solution on how to find it. But as she explains it to Kana puts her to sleep, hides her in a bush, and heads towards it herself. Unfortunately, Kane arrives and finds Lucy shortly afterwards. Kane uses Curse of Vengeance magic, effectively voodoo dolls. He's a bit awkward and kind of has the exact personality you'd think someone looking like this would have, but I do like him blatantly being like, oops, hey, I forgot to put your hair in my magic to make it work. Do you mind? If you're gonna be a weirdo and a creep, at least be a silly, goofy weirdo and a creep. Actually, scratch that, just don't be a weirdo. Regardless, once he has her hair, he's able to fully control and manipulate her body however he sees fit, which usually, that's pretty in line with some abilities we've seen, but in this case it just comes off as so much creepier than normal, probably because he's an ugly bastard character. He kind of gives off the same energy as when you ask someone what superpower they would want, and their answer is like, I don't know, X-ray vision or invisibility. You just know that that's not gonna be used for good. But as creepy as he is, he's also kind of stupid in an endearing way. Like when Lucy says it must be a trick, he puts his own hair in the doll and lets her use it to prove that he isn't lying. There's like a weird earnestness to it. Ultimately, he gets the doll back and Lucy calls Taurus to defend her, but Kane just knocks him away like it is nothing. Even Sagittarius's arrows and Scorpio's sand just bounce right off of him. Without even using magic, he is basically a mountain on legs that can't be stopped. Not only that, but his hair is also on the doll, meaning he can manipulate himself with it to do the impossible. For example, he turns into pure light, cotton, and steel, which allows him to become more defensive or offensive as needed. Luckily, Ultear has driven Natsu in this direction and he soon arrives, though she is right behind him, and suddenly we've gone from 2 unwinnable fights to a 2-on-2 brawl, and also Happy is here. It's a really cool moment where they put their rivalry in the test aside, fix their hair, and pose themselves ready to fight with each other. The odds shift even further for us as Ultear chooses to return to Hades with Zeref. As she leaves, Lucy tries to chase after her, but she is frozen in place. Kane had already managed to grab one of her hairs and now has full control of her body. And of course, this leads to him making her stretch, spread her legs, and do a silly dance. Even when Kane has her charge towards Natsu, it just results in her butt getting grabbed. So it's about what we'd expect from this fight. Happy swoops in and steals the doll away from Kane, but he stops to play with her until Kane takes it back, and things basically degenerate to a game of keep away with Lucy flopping around in different directions every few seconds. In the chaos, Natsu ends up getting pinned under a pile of boulders, and Lucy is totally drained of magic. This lets Kane completely beat the shit out of her. I am talking Videl versus Spopovich levels of brutal as he keeps beating down on her while she's on the ground. It gets so bad that as he pulls her hair up, she smiles, blood running from her mouth, and tells Natsu that she doesn't care how terrible things are, she has always had fun when they are together. Kane is literally going to break her in half, but Natsu realizes that the doll landed nearby him, so he can use it to force Lucy's body body to attack. On her own, she would never be able to stop Kane, but empowered by the doll, she is way stronger than she should be. He's even able to transfer his fire into the doll's fists, then have Happy send her flying through the air for a Lucy version of Fire Dragon Kick. And it's about here that I'm starting to notice a trend among these 7 kin of Purgatory. They all cause their own defeat. Zancro's fire was used against him, Zoldio stole Loki's body, allowing Capricorn to attack him, and now Kane's doll gives Lucy the strength to beat him. This takes things one step further than just the teamwork of Fairy Tail against the hatred of Grimoire Heart. When you're looking for an answer in darkness, when you're looking to hurt others, you will only hurt yourselves. This is the fate of the 7 kin of Purgatory. Lucy gets the idea to search for a boat, as that would be where Zeref is being taken to, so they should look from the air if possible, but Happy is out of magic, so they need to find Carla and Lily. Meanwhile, Kana is on her way to Mavis's grave, and more interestingly, Gray stumbles upon Ultear carrying Zeref. However, the second that he sees her, all he can think about is how much she looks like Ur. Finally, on Grimoire Heart's ship, a silhouetted man named Blue Note talks to Hades about getting involved in the conflict, though Hades says it is still too early. But this guy is seriously strong. Seemingly just by putting his hand on the table, the entire ship starts to sink into the ground. Blue Note offers to hide the ship underground, but Hades wants it to remain in the open, a trap in plain sight for Fairy Tail to walk into. Blue Note has quite a bit of notoriety. Doranbolt and Lahar talk about how he single-handedly took out all of Gora's soldiers during the Cabrian War. Knowing he is in Grimoire Hearts' rank, Doranbolt asks for more time, and then steals the Council's communication lacrima to delay the possible Aetherion attack. He appears in front of Natsu's group and offers to take each member of Fairy Tail away with his teleportation magic, but Natsu refuses. Fairy Tail will deal with its problems on its own, and if the Council wants to destroy their sacred ground to stop Grimoire Heart, then they'll just have to stop the attack by defeating the Dark Guild before Aetherion ever becomes a necessity. And the look that Natsu gives Doranbolt, telling him that it doesn't matter if it's Grimoire Hearts or the Council, he will never allow anyone to hurt his family. It's just fantastic. Meanwhile, Meredy is taking on Urza and Juvia. Her magic is kind of similar to Urza's Heaven Wheel armor, but she makes magical swords instead of physical ones. Meredy has a ranking list of each Fairy Tail member based on their threat level. Juvia is 13, Urza is 4, Gildarts is 3, Makarov is 2, and Gray is number 1 for making Ultear sad by being responsible for her mother's death. Now Juvia gets completely rocked by Meredy's attacks, and they only become more violent as she talks about Gray, to the point that even Urza is pushed into a corner. But Meredy has made a mistake. She hit the Gray button. Suddenly, Juvia gets to her feet as the water around them waves and crashes, completely taking out Meredy's swords. And in the most terrifying panel so far in the series, Juvia cricks her neck and asks whose life Meredy is planning to take. Completely enraged, she becomes like a monster. Urza comments on how she is an entirely different person from the one they fought during the test, and even looks terrified at the thought of fighting her now. With this power, Juvia tells Urza to run and find Wendy and Gray while she takes on Meredy alone. And I'm gonna bring this up here because it will come up later in the arc too. This is the power of love, which is essentially the power of friendship as it exists in Fairy Tail. I have never heard someone complain about how Juvia suddenly overpowered Meredy after being totally booty blasted. After all, love and emotion are such a pivotal part of her character, right? Of course she becomes stronger to protect Gray. But the same is true of every Fairy Tail member. Just because they don't want to go to Slam City with each other doesn't mean that the bonds between these characters are any less important or real than Juvia's love for Gray. So when Natsu gets a power-up to save Makarov from Zancro, that's no different. And when he gets another one at the end of the arc, it's also the same. Anyways, tangent aside, Meredy is excited by the idea of Juvia being in love with Gray and uses those emotions as a way of binding her and Gray together with sensory link. While Juvia loves the idea of being one with Gray at first, the second Meredy hits her and points out that Gray feels that pain too, I mean, just look at her. God, these panels make me want a Mashima horror manga. Juvia continues to beat Meridy's ass until the link is extended to include Meredy as well. That means when Juvia hits her, or gets hit by her, Gray will feel the pain either way. Meredy doesn't care who wins the fight, just so long as the result is that Gray dies, even if it means that she dies in the process. It's this really excellent way of pitting ultimate hatred against ultimate love, all while shutting down all the momentum that Juvia had just built up. But that doesn't mean this fight is over. Meredy commits to the idea that the fight ends with her death anyways, so she summons swords to take her own life and get it over with. But at the last moment, Juvia injures her own leg, making Meredy fall and having her attack miss. Juvia calls out, explaining that even when Fairy Tail defeats an enemy, they refuse to kill them, but Meredy shrugs that off, saying it's naive. She vows to kill Gray for Ultear no matter what, and here we finally get a look back at why. An orphaned Meredy survived Grimoire Heart's attack on her homeland as they were searching for Zeref's key, but as the other members bicker about killing the young girl, Ultear offered to take her in, effectively becoming her adopted mother. It's kind of a lukewarm reason to be so dedicated to someone, and we really fly by it in the manga, especially considering the kind of backstories I know Mashima is capable of. It feels a lot more vapid than the reasons we are used to in this story, and that's kind of upsetting because I want to like Meredy more. As she thinks back to these memories, Juvia runs up and hugs her. The sensory link had extended beyond simply sharing physical senses and was also sharing emotions. Juvia says that if she has someone who is important to her, then she needs to live for that person, not die for them. Not so subtly, the same lesson that Natsu tried to give Gray when he wanted to sacrifice himself to kill Deliora. But Meredy isn't just hearing these words, she's also feeling the emotion behind them and knows how genuine Juvia is here. For a moment, Juvia's view of the world becomes how Meredy sees things as well, and it's just enough for her to no longer want to die or to even fight. And ultimately, she turns off the sensory link. I like this. We are keeping in line with Grimoire Hearts being the cause of their own defeat. It's only because she connected herself to the link that the battle ended like this, but it's also a nice way to tie a battle like this. This was a conflict that was deeply personal for everyone involved, and the way that it was resolved was equally personal, which I feel really worked. Of course, Gray wasn't directly in this fight, however, he was feeling the effects of it, so while they were battling each other in person, he was just out in the forest going through emotional whiplash and random moments of intense pain without having any idea of why, which is kind of funny to think about actually. But as the mark on his wrist tying him to Juvia and Meredy fade away, he is discovered by Ultear. She confirms that she is in fact the daughter of Ur, and he immediately thinks that he must be the cause for her turning evil, infiltrating the council, and joining Grimoire Heart. However, before he can say anything, she says that she wanted to meet him and that she is on his side. She goes on to say that she believes her mother dying to protect her disciples was an honorable thing. Not only that, she tells him that bringing back Zeref is what her mother would have wanted. Meanwhile, Natsu convinces Dornbolt to stall the Etherion as long as possible and earns a ton of admiration through his determination to defeat Grimoire Hearts despite the odds. And Urza, while searching for others, comes across Azuma. But she isn't the only one in danger. Even the Fairy Tail members who have already been defeated aren't safe. Rusty Rhodes shows up with Gajil, Elfmin, Mira, and Evergreen still unconscious, and only Lisana, Lily, and Levi are there to protect them. Not exactly a fighting force, especially since Lily is too tired to even transform. To make matters worse, Blue Note steps onto the island now that Meredy has been taken down. He soon comes across Natsu's group, and just him standing there makes the rain heavier. He is the commander of Grimoire Heart, standing above the Seven, and has complete control over gravity, literally crushing everyone into the ground and collapsing the earth beneath them. But he has no interest in Fairy Tail or in Zeref. All he wants is to find Mavis's grave. Which, of course, leads us back to Kana, who is standing face to face with it right now. She's happy to have finally met the requirements to be an S-class wizard so that she can face her father, but as she stares at the grave, it begins to glow. This grave is the seal of one of Fairy Tail's great magics, Fairy Glitter, something on par with Fairy Law, which Blue Note wanted to steal for himself. But Kana didn't care about finding this magic, she just wanted to pass the test. But even having found the grave, nothing changed. She thinks back to 12 years ago when her mother passed away from an illness and how she learned about her father when she read her mother's will. What she learned from it brought her to Fairy Tail, where for the first time in her life she met her father, Gildarts. But he had no idea who she was, so every day she went to the guild and waited for his return until she eventually joined. Of course, Gildarts rarely returned from missions, and when he did, he was quick to leave again, but each time she met him, it became more and more awkward to reveal the truth. How could she explain that the past 5 times they met, she didn't tell him that he was her father? On top of that, he was the Gildarts, the strongest wizard in Fairy Tail, and she didn't know if she could live up to that. Ultimately, she decided that once she became an S-class wizard, she would tell him, and then she failed 4 times. Even newer members like Urza and Mira passed before she did, and it only made her more and more disheartened. Obviously, Lucy felt a connection to this story, which is why she was so passionate about helping, and in return, Kana gave her a card which allowed Lucy to signal Kana for help from anywhere in an instant. And considering she is now in front of Blue Note, this is a good time to ask for help. Though I guess when Kane was beating her into the ground, that also could have been a good time to use it. Either way, the card starts to glow, and Kana questions everything she is trying to do. She put Lucy to sleep, abandoned her, put her in danger, all to pass the test that Lucy had offered to help her with. She had betrayed her friend, all so that she could connect with Gildarts or become an S-class wizard, and that's completely against everything she stands for as a person. However, it wasn't too late to set things right. With that in mind, she plunges her hand into the light coming from Mavis's grave and begs for the strength to protect the guild that she loves. And as tears stream down her face, Mavis speaks to her from beyond the grave, passing on fairy glitter. With this in hand, or I guess on arm, Kana rushes to the battlefield and begins casting it the second she sees Blue Note, only for him to send her plummeting to the ground. This essentially becomes a spirit bomb moment. Kana needs to take time to gather magic and cast fairy glitter, and it's up to Natsu and the others to hold Blue Note off and keep her safe while she does. The problem is, none of them can even get to their feet. By the time Kana actually gets to use the spell, Blue Note sinks the whole area, nullifying the attack, though Kana believes it is simply because she is too weak to use it. But you know who isn't weak? Gildarts, who arrives just as Blue Note is about to kill Kana, and this dude is angry. And yeah, the moment is cool as fuck, but it really does steal the scene away from Kana and Fairy Glitter, which was meant to kind of be like the big moment for the arc that everything was leading towards. Remember, the emotional core we started with for this arc was around Kana and how insecure she was. And this was going to be a moment using Fairy Glitter where she could prove she is enough. And that was just taken away in an instant. That said, Gildarts and Kana being connected is a very important thing to establish going into the rest of the arc, so it's not a totally wasted scene and it's not totally pointless. Regardless, Gildarts has Blue Note scared stiff. Unlike his fight with Natsu, he is going full throttle from the start, flipping the ground, shattering it, and launching a punch that pushes him back, which is a pretty big deal considering that Blue Note controls gravity. But Gildarts didn't come alone. Freed and Bixlow arrive at the Fairy Tail camp to fend off Rusty Rose. Luckily, they all saw the signal flare on their trip home and turned back to help. It is super nice to see these two going hard again after throwing their last fight. They beat this man so badly that he basically pisses himself and then demand that he stand back up so they can knock him down again. However, as the tide finally turns in Fairy Tail's favor, we get an ominous message from the narrator. The Battle of Sirius Island was heading for an end. We all believed in our victory. Yes, we all believed. And as we see these words, we are looking at an aged up Romeo. But that will be an issue for the next video. For now, we gotta focus on these 3 major fights. Gildarts and Blue Note, Freed and Bixlow against Rusty, and Urza versus Azuma. Hades hasn't even touched the island yet, just a reminder. Now, scariest of these, I think, is Azuma. He explains that he has wood magic, and they do give an explanation for why he can make explosions, but it just kind of boils down to, and also I make things go boom. More importantly though, he has bought enough time to connect roots with the entire island, allowing him to knock over the entire sacred tree. And as the tree falls, all of Fairy Tail suddenly becomes weaker. As it turns out, this tree protects and strengthens fairies on the island, so much so that it even prevents them from dying, which is why the S-Class test is held here. It allows everyone to reach their potential and fight seriously without worrying about killing each other. But now the tree's power is in Azuma's hand. Luckily, he is all about fighting strong opponents, so he leaves Urza at full power, saying he will drain power from her guildmates until she manages to take him down. She is officially Fairy Tail's only hope, and the longer it takes for her to win, the more of a lead Rusty and Blue Note will continue to develop. Not to mention, Makarov is no longer protected from dying as he continues to bleed out on the ground. Now, just a quick aside here, I don't know what it is, but they have been showing a ton of Urza transformation panels in this arc in comparison to previous ones. Like, usually there's one, maybe two, more often than not she just appears in the new armor, but in this arc they're like, hey, enjoy a mostly nude Urza in every chapter she appears in. Like, this shot is sick, but also, she could have been in the armor already, right? It might make sense to have a frame like this in the anime where it's, you know, an animation, but in a manga where she's jumping into that armor, you could have just drawn her in the armor. Regardless, it's still a gorgeous panel either way, but even in cases like that, like, it's to show that she fights dynamically, she fluidly transforms between armors with each attack. I get the purpose, but then she's just standing there naked sometimes. That said, we do see her cycling through quite a lot of different armors here, and that's cool. Base armor, Heaven's Wheel, flight armor, and of course, she also stops to think about trying her temptation armor as well. Like, man, I'm just tired with it. Nothing seems to work though, as her attacks get absorbed by wood he summons to block for himself. So instead, she goes on the full offensive and completely gives up on defense. Clear Heart Clothing, the same style that she used to fight Ikaruga. Though this time we get a bit more detail. She explains that she channels so much magic into her swords in this form that she doesn't have any left to create armor. This is it, her ultimate attack. She winds back, charges in, and she's bound up in roots that coil around her chest and spread her legs, all so that he can set off explosions with her at the center of them. It's a moment which, interestingly enough, seems to resonate with the imprisoned Jellal all the way back at the Magic Council's dungeon. Jellal mutters her name, which draws the attention of some nearby guards, but they just torture and shock him, telling him that if he wants food, he needs to beg for it. But rather than asking for food, he just whispers that he wants her to win the battle. Somehow his voice reaches her, and in one of her most iconic images in the series, Urza digs her sword into the ground and forces herself to her feet. Again, she is bound by roots, but as she thinks back to Jellal, she begs her body to move. But once again, she is locked in another massive explosion. Barely alive, Urza thinks of her guild and pulls strength from them as she remembers that she is not just protecting her friends, they are also protecting her. The will of Fairy Tail has overridden Azuma's magic, and the island's magic had kept Urza alive despite his attacks. This is the power of friendship, and it's done perfectly to fit the themes of the arc. In one final slash, Urza manages to slice through Azuma and finishes the fight. With his last breath, Azuma returns Fairy Tail's power, explaining that Ultear was the one who manipulated Jellal, calling her a truly frightening woman, and explains that all lost magic has a cost if used, as he turns into a tree. Which I guess is his magic turning against him and losing him the fight. I don't know, that's the only way that he fits into the other 6 losses, so we're gonna go with it. The important thing is that Fairy Tail's magic is returned. As we catch up with them, Fried and Bixlow overtake Rusty again, and we get this excellent scene of Blue Note stomping on Gildarts only for him to reach up and grab his foot halfway down. Both Blue Note and Rusty are forced to use their ultimate attacks, Black Hole and the Tower of Dingir. Unfortunately, Rusty still has his glasses on, so Bixlow's figure eyes won't affect him, but Elfman is a perfect target. Bixlow turns Elfman into a puppet and attacks Rusty with him, releasing the control of the tower and opening him up to a combo attack from Lisana and Fried. Meanwhile, Blue Note's black hole shatters as Gildarts grabs it, and in the next moment he is punched into the sky. With that, only Hades and Ultear remain. Now, living up to Azuma's words, Ultear tells Grey that she will be fulfilling her mother's wishes by taking Zeref away from the island. She then tasks Grey with the job of defeating Hades, asking him to use Ice Shell to do so. And I get it, we've all had people we thought we could change, you know, it happens. But this is just clearly a way for Ultear to take control of everything while also killing the guy she blames for killing her mom. But of course, this is Grey. He is always looking for a reason to make up for his past by taking his own life. So naturally, he's all over this. Although he does say that it's not for her or for it's for Fairy Tail, which doesn't really make a difference. Anyways, Natsu's group returns to the base camp where the remaining members decide to split into an attack and defense group. Meanwhile, Ultear meets up with Meredy, who is carrying Zeref. She apologizes for not having found Gray, but Ultear tells her that he isn't an enemy, he is a pawn. Shocker, the woman who convinced Jellal to do a slavery for 8 years ended up not being trustworthy. Crazy. She explains that she told Gray that her father was killed by Hades, and in Ur's diary, she wrote about her trying to defeat Grimoire Heart to avenge him. This is why she developed the Ice Shell to kill Hades. Unfortunately, Ultear couldn't learn it, but it's the only spell that could stop him. What are the odds? So instead, she promised to seal and hide Zeref in a place that no one could find him, and asked Gray to use Ice Shell to take out Hades. And naturally, it's completely untrue. As we learned at the end of the Deliora arc, Ur's husband didn't die because of Hades. Ur left him to focus on learning magic. And then she does a crazy evil laugh. Meredy is super confused as to why Ultear would betray Hades, but she is told that Zeref should belong to just the two of them. Followed immediately by, I will never give Zeref to anyone, he is mine and mine alone. And that is probably super reassuring to Meredy. Ultear then sees Juvia on the floor and summons a sword to kill her, saying that she wants to leave Gray with no future, and that even if he manages to beat Hades without the Ice Shell, the ones he loved will be dead. This girl is evil. Luckily, Gray turns out to not be an idiot, and he had been following her since he left, which makes me very happy. My biggest problem with Gray as a character is that he often forgets the lessons of the Deliora arc. But at least for this moment, he doesn't. He specifically calls back to what Natsu told him, telling Ura that he promised not to use the Ice Shell again, and that it didn't matter if it was Ultear's wish to use it against Hades, because he plans to follow the path that lets him live with his friends. While this resonates with Meredy, who herself was living for someone else and didn't value her own life, it only inspires Ultear to kill him herself and make it as brutal as possible. Gray goes in for the attack, but Ultear warns him that she is the leader of the kin of Purgatory, even with her stupid clock leotard. But before she can finish gloating, Gray knocks her down. Their battle ends up waking Juvia, and Gray sends her after Meredy, who is trying to get Zeref to safety. Really funny bit where her legs are still hurt from earlier, so she is scuttling towards Meredy on the ground like she's in the Grudge. But as for the main fight, it boils down to Gray using ice magic, then Ultear sending that ice into the future where it melts or evaporates. She even says that she learned the Arc of Time specifically to kill Maker Wizards like her mother. Gray hears this and thinks back to all the times he found Ur crying while holding up her daughter's clothes, and vows to stop her using Ur's magic. But Ultear can get rid of ice in an instant, so instead he stabs his abdomen and makes a blade of blood, quoting his master's last message and promising to seal away Ultear's darkness. This is now living ice, and since Ultear can't affect living things, like the cells in blood, she can't melt his weapons and he manages to land a devastating hit. But the Arc of Time isn't her only magic, as it turns out she also has Ice Make magic, making a massive rose garden to attack with. Something which is hugely impactful in the anime, as we actually got to see Ur using the same attack in episode 15. But it isn't present in the manga, which is unfortunate. Gray asks what happened to make her like this, and as they grapple each other, they roll off a cliff and begin plummeting. It's during this fall that we learn about Ultear's past, as Ultear remembers that she was abandoned by her mother and sent to a magical research facility. They performed awful experiments to flood her with more magical energy since she was just a child, but the process completely broke her. One day she managed to break free and escape, and she ran all the way back to her mother's house barefoot in the snow, but when she arrived, her heart broke. She didn't see a mother who was mourning her daughter, she saw Ur happy. She was laughing and smiling with the two children that Ultear believed had replaced her. If you remember back to the Deliora arc, we had Ur specifically talking about how she didn't see Gray and Leon as replacements. But as a child seeing this, you can completely understand why Ultear would think this. And so she returned to the only other place that she knew. She went back to the facility with the goal of becoming strong enough to take revenge against her mother. As she studied, she learned about Zeref, the dark guilds pursuing him, and the great magic world where non-wizards were eradicated. And this is when Hades found her. He explains that in the great magic world, magic would be truly freed and wizards could finally regain their lost happiness. It was a place where the time arc could be completed. In this world, it was impossible, but in the great magic world, whoever mastered the arc of time could become a time traveler. It was an opportunity for Ultear to restart her terrible life and live happily with her mother as she should have the first time. She hates the mother who gave up on her, but she is desperate for the mother she could have had if she weren't separated from her. I really like this backstory. It makes a lot of sense for her character. Of course she wants to find Zeref. Of course she wants to create the great magical world. It would erase all of the torture and experiments that she went through, and it would give her her mother back. However, as she continues to fight Gray and thinks back on her past, new memories suddenly emerge, but they aren't her memories. Back on Galuna, when the ice shell melted, we were told that Ur flowed away into the sea. And now that this battle is taking place in the sea, her thoughts are being passed to Ultear. She gets an image of her mother begging for help because her daughter had been born with too much magic and was being made sick by it. She was told that there were facilities that were meant to help with this kind of problem. However, soon after, the facility told Ur that her daughter had died and that she was better off not seeing the body. And the pain in this panel as she screams and begs for her daughter back is palpable. And suddenly, everything Ultear believes about her life is called into question. In her shock, Gray manages to lock her in a pillar of ice, and now that she can't fight back, he tells her about the one and only time Ur told them about her. She had said that when Ultear was born, she felt a light come into her heart, and she felt hopeful for the first time about the future. She was so happy that she couldn't stop her tears, which is why she named her daughter Ultear. And finally, Ultear realizes that she didn't just want to go back in time to before she hated her mother, she just wanted to go back to a point that she could see her mother one more time. This is easily one of my favorite stories in the series. It's just a very simple story of a girl being separated by her mother and terrible people keeping them apart. But it's built out in a really elegant way that makes the character a real standout for me. As Gray leaves her and heads towards Hades, she warns him that he isn't strong enough to defeat him, and Gray agrees. He isn't, but he also isn't alone. As things move to the climax, we get a bit of pathetic fallacy. A brutal storm erupts, which is especially bad because Lily hates thunder, which is adorable. Anyways, Levi, Lisana, Bixlo, and Freed stay at the camp while Natsu, Lucy, Lily, Wendy, and Happy head towards Hades to take him on. As they leave, Lisana asks Lucy to make sure she stays by Natsu's side because when he has people he can trust close by, he becomes very strong. Shout out to the canonical power of friendship. Meanwhile, Juvia is still crawling after Meredy when they find Zancro. He attacks them after accusing Ultear of trying to steal Zeref for herself, and Meredy begs for him back because Ultear promised to restore her village in the great magic world. But Zancro rightfully points out that that doesn't make any sense because Ultear was the one who destroyed the village. Meredy is just another pawn to her. However, then Zeref says a single word: Acnologia. As he does, another wave of darkness is sent out and Zancro is killed on the spot. However, the wave was limited enough that both Meredy and Juvia survived, much to Zeref's relief. He says that he has no intention of being anyone's ally or enemy. However, if this age came to an end, he might become active once again. However, he does wish for Natsu to break him before that happens. Dornbolt overhears all of this and is petrified by the word Acnologia, more so than he was at the thought of Zeref becoming active. On the way to Hades, Gray and Urza, our most injured fighters, find each other and Gray is about to collapse until she catches him. He comments on how he is always being saved by other people, and Urza just smiles and says, "As am I." And I love this moment of vulnerability and pride. None of them want to be a burden to others, but everyone is proud to have friends that they know they can rely on. But now that the gang's all here, it is time for the third generation of Fairy Tail to go head-to-head with the leader of its second generation. Hades invites them onto his ship, and thinking ahead, Natsu asks the cats to search for the ship's power source. The last thing he needs is for the battle to happen on a moving vehicle. The second everyone gets into the door, they launch an all-out attack. While Hades is able to defend against just about everything, the combo attack and the way that everyone cover each other's weaknesses continues to catch him off guard. He'll grab Natsu with his chain magic, only for Urza to slice through it immediately. He'll send Natsu flying, just for Gray to create a hammer and launch him right back into the fight. We even get a unison raid with Wendy's Sky Dragon Roar and Lucy's Scorpio Sand, all of which is swirling around Natsu to empower his attacks, and this does land pretty strongly. However, it more or less equates to shredding Hades' cape, and not much else. As the dust settles, he emerges unharmed and drops a chilling line. He says that people often refer to errors as learning experiences, but true errors, like choosing to stand against him, do not offer the chance to learn from them. That was our full effort, and Hades is completely unaffected. Not only that, but he comes back, says he's done warming up, and then seemingly yells at Wendy so hard that she explodes into a burst of light. Luckily, the absolute homie Horologium showed up to save her. Unluckily, he couldn't save her clothes, so she's naked inside of him. I think they were going for like some dramatic effect here, like Hades blew her up and only the clothes were left behind, but like, Wendy we're gonna do this with? I don't know, man. I do like Lucy pointing out that she's been in danger the entire time and Horologium hasn't come to help her at all, though. I think that's a funny bit. Either way, when Horologium leaves, he gives Wendy a set of Celestial Realm clothing, thank God, and they actually look pretty good, but regardless, we still aren't in a good spot. Between the Amaterasu spells, chain magic, and finger guns, Hades makes pretty quick work about bringing everyone to their knees. He tells them that handing the guild to Makarov was a mistake. He changed the guild by shining too much light on magic. And as Natsu talks back, Hades starts shooting his limbs just to inflict pain. He is trying to kill them, but he also wants to make it as slow and painful a process as possible. When he ultimately goes for the kill, a sudden flash erupts through the ship as a bolt of lightning rips through the ceiling and crashes through Hades' hand. Seemingly from nowhere, Laxus arrives and asks if this is the guy who hurt his grandfather. And unlike his former guildmates, Laxus is far from being worn down by this war, and his attacks make a real impact. Meanwhile, Dornbolt has returned to Lahar and warns him about Acnologia. Just hearing the name is enough for the Council's forces to pull out entirely. Anyways, I love this bit where Laxus shows up and calls everyone pathetic for ganging up on Hades and still being beaten. And then you have Natsu, who's just sitting there smiling and agreeing with him. He is just happy to be seeing Laxus again after all this time, and it's very wholesome. Urza asks why he's here, and he says that he came to visit the first master's grave. But he also says that while he's here, he doesn't mind digging another grave for Hades as well. God, this guy is fucking cool. He and Hades go pretty much even. He lands more consecutive attacks and beats Hades around the room, but eventually Hades manages to land a bigger and more effective hit. Ultimately, Laxus gets overwhelmed by these attacks and launches one massive lightning blast of his own as Hades fires a beam of magic back at him. However, Laxus wasn't aiming for Hades. Instead, he fired all of his lightning towards Natsu, who consumes it like fire, making him and his magic electrically charged. But Natsu can't eat lightning. Then you probably should also have a problem with him eating Ether Nano to beat Jellal, or the Black Fire from Zancro. By this point in the story, we have established that Natsu can consume magic of other forms to some degree. It might wreak havoc on him or make him sick once the fight's over, but in extreme situations we've seen it happen. In fact, way back in chapter 106, Happy mentions that Natsu has eaten Laxus' lightning in the past, it just made him sick after the fight. On top of that, the way it's written here, while it looks like an electrical attack, what Laxus is actually doing is just passing his magic to Natsu in the form of pure magical power. I mean, that's exactly what Ether Nano is, right? In that case, it was just solidified magical energy, and this is just a different state of that. Regardless of whether you agree that he should or shouldn't be able to do that though, which, again, he should. You're wrong if you think otherwise. What's most important here is that it is so goddamn cool, and sometimes the rule of cool has to be enough. Natsu's a bit confused by this. He knows that he isn't as strong as Laxus, so why is he being entrusted with his magic like this? But Laxus says that it's not about who is strong or who is weak. What matters is that when the guild takes a hit, it is the guild who should hit back 100 times harder. He doesn't even have a guild mark anymore, so it isn't his place to finish this fight. This is very different from his mindset in the battle for Fairy Tail. It is humble, it's modest, it's acknowledging things beyond power as being not just important, but fundamental to what it means to be a guild. In the short time since he's left, Laxus has grown a monumental degree. Thinking back to Makarov's hesitation about passing the guild to Laxus, all of those issues seem to have been resolved by this point. Sure, he isn't exactly a social person, which could be a problem when running a guild, but by now he is an entirely different and more well-rounded character. And crucially, all of that growth feels believable and tangible because of what we've experienced with him. This is why Fairy Tail doesn't kill people. Stopping them, showing them a better way, and setting them on a better path allows them to grow in a way which wouldn't be possible otherwise. But with the passing of his magic to Natsu, the Thunder Fire Dragon Slayer is born. With Laxus's magic at his fingertips, Natsu is way faster and stronger. His flames are coated in electricity and pack enough of a punch for him to actually hurt Hades a very significant amount. He thinks back to all of his friends who were hurt during this pointless war and goes on a full assault. Out of desperation, Hades uses his chains to lock Natsu's hands, but all this does is hold himself still, opening him up for Natsu to use a Thunder Fire Dragon Roar and take him out for good. Fairy Tail has won, but it took every ounce of the magic they had available to make it happen. Or that's what I would say if Hades didn't get back up. Not just that, he reveals a magic that he has been hiding to this point, removing his eye patch and opening the Devil's Eye. It's a power-up to an insane degree, and just the energy coming off of it is enough to freeze Urza in place. Meanwhile, in the engine room, the cats have found the power source, though it seems to be alive. There isn't time to focus on that though, as they are swarmed by Grimoire Heart soldiers. One of these soldiers has a sword that changes size, which Lily claims for himself, a perfectly fitting weapon for a size-changing Catman. But even still, they can't find a way to stop the ship. Back on the battlefield, Hades talks about achieving the depths of magic, something he refers to as the One Magic, which he will gain access to when Zeref awakens the Great Magic World. However, this phrase, the One Magic, reminds Lucy of her mother, and she starts to rack her brain to make the connection. As she does, Hades uses a magic he calls Nemesis, opening a verse from the Book of Zeref and summoning a small army of demons from the rubble around him. In that moment, each of the Fairy Tail wizards begins trembling in fear, but Natsu thinks back to his lessons with Guildarts. Fear is not evil, it's about knowing your weakness. When people know their own weakness, they have the opportunity to become stronger and gentler human beings. All of them know how weak they are in this moment, and the next step is to get stronger to overcome the enemy. When you're alone, you can be afraid because you can't do anything, but they aren't alone, and they have nothing to be afraid of. These words light a fire in his friends, and one by one they make their way to their feet and charge forward, even if they don't have magic. But hey, how poetic would it be if a man trying to get rid of the non-magic people was defeated by wizards who were drained of their magic? As they run forward, Natsu stumbles as he's attacked by the horde of demons, but Lucy and Wendy grab his arms and throw him forward. He floats to right in front of Gray and Urza, and together they use their legs to launch him as powerfully as they can. As he flies towards his enemy, Hades launches an attack meant to pull Natsu into darkness. But for some reason, this attack is ineffective. And with his built-up speed, Natsu starts a barrage of punches against Hades. And coincidentally, this is also when the cats manage to destroy the living engine of the ship, its Grimoire Heart. As it turns out, the demonic heart was keeping Hades alive by extending his life and fueling powerful magic, an idea that was likely inspired by the Sirius tree. And speaking of the tree, Ultear has taken action to start making up for her evil life, and the first step on that journey is to use the Arc of Time to repair the Great Tree. Again, a moment that could only happen because Fairy Tail doesn't kill their enemies. Because Gray didn't choose to kill her, because he gave her a second chance at life, she is here and able to put them in a position where they can actually win this fight. With the tree back up, Fairy Tail is empowered once again, and more importantly, protected from death. Now that everyone is refueled, Laxus gets up to defend Natsu by punching Hades in the face. Lucy calls Capricorn, Wendy hits him with a Sky Dragon wing attack, Gray launches an Icebringer, and Urza strips again to swap into Heaven's Wheel armor for a massive chain attack. And finally, Natsu crashes down with his ultimate Thunder Fire Dragon slaying technique. This is the power of friendship done right. Everyone empowered by one another, by the enemies they allowed to survive so that they could change and become better, and by the lessons of those who came before them. With all of these things working together, Fairy Tail has defeated Grimoire Heart. So while Hades wasn't defeated by his own magic per se, him teaching the Arc of Time to Ultear, which allowed her to repair the Sirius tree, ultimately does lead to his downfall, and ties him into that thematic way that each member of Grimoire Heart was defeated. Now, I do want to make a quick aside and talk about Natsu being unaffected by Hades' attack. For those who do know where the story is going, I would assume this has to do with his connection with Zeref and everything we've been hinting at throughout this arc, and that's all in line with these little nods to the Dragon Slayers being older than they should be and all that stuff that we've seen time and time again through the story. Either way, this is not the end of this arc. As the sun rises over the horizon, Makarov and the other fairies arrive to kick Grimoire Heart off the island. There's an almost touching reunion between Laxus and Makarov, though the old man can't express his feelings, so he just puts on a show by yelling instead. Though he does say the words, "How dare a man who hasn't been reinstated yet set foot on Sirius Island?" So obviously he does plan to let him back in the future. He isn't the only one giving Laxus a hard time though, even Gildarts calls him lame for getting expelled. Hades then asks Makarov to kill him, even warning him that he will return one day to crush the guild if he doesn't, but Makarov refuses. He asks Hades why he turned to evil, and again Hades says he was looking for the one magic which stemmed from darkness. But Makarov explains that finding that magic wouldn't change anything. If magic is darkness, that's fine. And if it's light, that's fine too. All of that is up in the air, but what is certain is that magic is alive. It changes with time. It can be whatever you imagine, and depending on the person and their feelings, it can become light or dark, red or blue. And this is a lesson that he learned from Hades, but which Hades himself seemed to have forgot. The remaining members of Grimoire Heart, Hades, Rusty Rose, and Cain all return to their ship, and they finally get what they all wanted. Zeref appears before them. He tells them that people like them made him what he is, and their evil thoughts have summoned Acnologia, and he can no longer be stopped. Because of them, this is going to be where the world ends. Immediately, Zeref has this very different energy to what we've seen from him so far. He seems angry, resentful. Hades asks for Zeref's keys to be gathered, but the Black Wizard says he doesn't need them because he's already awake. Not only that, but he is saddened by the idea of all the people who were killed in pursuit of some keys dreamt up by a small group of devoted cultists. In actuality, he had never been asleep. He had spent 400 years facing countless battles and countless deaths, but one day had taught him the value of life. This was the day that he was cursed. The more precious he feels human life is, the more souls he steals away from those around him. So to stop himself from killing people, he needed to see human life as worthless. He became a living paradox. It's what he meant when he says that nature rejects him. In order to save life, he needs to not care about life, and in not caring about life, he doesn't need to save it anymore. In the same way, he doesn't belong in the natural world anymore, but he is cursed with immortality and cannot be removed from the natural world. Ultimately, Zeref casts judgment on Grimoire Heart, firstly for calling Acnologia, and second for making him forget the weight of life, and in an instant he kills all three of them. As for the remaining members, Meredy and Ultear, they had grabbed a rowboat and were heading across the sea. Meredy confronts Ultear about being the one who destroyed her home, and Ultear takes full accountability, saying that she had hoped she could fix it by turning back time. She acted as cruelly as possible in hopes of creating an ultimate good, but now that ultimate good was off the table, and all of her actions could not be erased. But she knows that she doesn't deserve forgiveness and doesn't ask for it either. In fact, she wants to take action to avoid Meredy bloodying her own hands by killing her. So instead, Ultear stabs herself in the chest. She tells Meredy to find happiness and says that she loves her, diving into the sea so that she can die surrounded by her mother. But Meredy dives in after her and saves her. Not just that, she creates a sense link so that they can fully understand the sadness and frustration each other was feeling. While Ultear was someone who had lived her life hating her mother for betraying her by adopting Gray and Leon, Meredy was choosing to forgive her adopted mother and instead begs Ultear to not leave her alone, and ultimately they decide to live on together. It is very simple but very effective parallelism between the two of them, and it just works. But not everyone will be living on peacefully because Acnologia is nearly here. Until he arrives, Fairy Tail is business as usual. Makarov cancels the S-Class test for this year given what has happened. We get a funny panel of him punching Natsu. Laxus pats Lisana's head and makes sure that she's real. And of course, we watch Lucy and Kana take an herbal bath in a spring. Kana mentions that fairy glitter seems to have worn off and apologizes for putting Lucy to sleep and looking for Mavis's grave alone. Of course, Lucy forgives her, and ultimately Kana decides that she will tell Gildarts the truth, even if she isn't an S-Class wizard. And Gildarts is shocked to hear it, but then he asks the big question. Who was your mother again? Was it Sarah, Naomi, Claire, Fina, Marley, Eliza, Emma, Layla, Jean, Sydney, Michelle, Stephanie?
Brandy, Heather, Channing, Brianna, Amber, Sabrina, Melody, Dakota, Sierra, Bambi, Crystal, Samantha, Autumn, Ruby, Taylor, Tara, Tammy.
Like, it's obvious that Gildarts fucks, but this guy fucks. Kana gets upset that he's such a womanizer and begins walking away, saying that she isn't expecting to suddenly be a family. But as she does, Gildarts hugs her and says that he knows for sure that her mother was Cornelia, the only woman that he ever truly loved. The woman that he married and who he has never been able to move beyond. She left him 18 years ago because all he ever did was work, and he heard rumors of her death, but he never knew that she had a child. And our boy immediately goes into full dad mode, promising that she will never be alone again, and asking if it's okay for him to love her despite all the time that they have missed together. It is a genuinely beautiful scene, so much so that Lucy thinks to herself that she should visit her own father when they get back to town, and maybe try to fix things a little bit more. And I just want to bring this up one more time here. This half of Fairy Tail is so heavily focused on fathers and the connection between parents and their children because Mashima's father died when he was very young, and because he grew up desperately wanting to know what it would have been like to still have his dad. So in many ways, Fairy Tail has been a way for him to explore that feeling up until now. Parents go missing like the dragons. Parents die saving their kids like Ur, or kids misunderstand their parents and hate them like Ultear. Some parents might have been worth hating, but are starting to come around, like Lucy's dad. People like Gildarts, who are larger than life and who Kana felt like she needed to live up to, just as Mashima's own father was an artist that he tried to live up to by becoming a mangaka. Or even child-grandparent dynamics, like Laxus and Makarov have, which mirror Mashima's own relationship with his grandfather who raised him in his father's absence. I think the reason that Fairy Tail lands in its mission of coming across as a story that feels like family is that so much of the story is a reflection of Mashima's real emotions, of him wondering what it would have been like to have a family. But more importantly, it comes with the understanding that everyone is hurting. Everyone is missing something. It could be a parent, it could be a child. Like Mira explained in the second chapter, everyone has a dark cloud. But when you're with the ones you love, you can always look for sunny spots, and even if you can't find them, you can dance in the rain together. But even with this mindset, not all bad times can be avoided, not all bad things can be overcome, and nothing could stop Doom from approaching Sirius Island. As Acnologia approaches, Gildarts shudders as he senses a familiar energy. Then the Dragon Slayers notice it as well. Suddenly, a deafening roar races across the island. Acnologia, a black dragon of unimaginable size, soars above Fairy Tail, and in just a moment, Makarov recognizes that this monster is the Apocalypse manifested. At first, Natsu calls out asking if it knows where the other dragons are, but in the next instant, Acnologia descends and shakes the island in its entirety. Fairy Tail tries to run and make it to their ship, but the dragon chases after them. Zeref comments on how Acnologia understands human language, but chooses to ignore it. After all, we don't stop to try to understand the insects we step on. Why would this great beast stop to hear out humanity? Seeing the dragon arrive, Zeref acknowledges that his life won't be ending anytime soon, and bids a farewell to Natsu. Makarov becomes a giant and tries to hold the dragon back so that his children could escape. No one wants to leave him behind, and Natsu even claims that as a dragon slayer, he should be the one fighting the dragon. But Laxus, of all people, grabs him and pulls him away. Natsu is fuming at first, but as he looks back, he sees Laxus shaking and realizes how serious this is. This is the type of enemy that Gildarts was warning him about. In fact, it's the specific enemy Gildarts was warning him about. Convinced of their doom, everyone starts to run, and Makarov orders them to live on into the future. But unfortunately, Makarov doesn't exactly hold the dragon off very long, and soon Acnologia knocks him down and begins clawing at him. He knows he's going to die, but he continues to smile, leaving no regrets, knowing that he acted like a father and protected his children to the very end. But if there's one thing he knows about his children, it's that they're dumb and they are hard-headed. Natsu is the first to charge back in and save the old man, but it would only be a few seconds until Urza and everyone else followed suit. Laxus says that he was against coming back, but this guild of his grandfathers is full of idiots who refuse to leave the old man behind. As they continue to fight, we see an image of a girl with long, wavy hair and fairy wings on her head beginning to pray. And they will need every prayer they can get. Fairy Tail gets absolutely destroyed, and Gildarts comments on how Acnologia is just toying with them, not even fighting as hard as it did when it took his arm and leg. But then the dragon takes flight. It aims at the island and prepares a breath attack, and seeing their death floating above them, all the guild can do is hold hands and try to channel their magic into Freed and Levy so that they can create a barrier, hoping to show the dragon the collective strength of their guild. It is a last-ditch demonstration of unity, even though they know they don't stand a chance. But hey, if you gotta go, you might as well go together. In a blinding flash of light and an enormous explosion, Sirius Island is completely erased, leaving only a chasm under the sea where it once stood. For the next 6 months, ships combed the area searching for Fairy Tail, but not a single survivor was found. And that is where the story comes to an end. Well, at least for the next 7 years. But for that, you're gonna have to check out part 3 once it's up. Remember to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss it when it's ready. And if you want to help me get it out, remember to check out my Patreon or consider becoming a member on YouTube if you'd like to donate towards me hiring some editors to get it out more quickly. Anyways, going forward in the story, we're going to be really shifting away from that idea of what it means to have a parent-child connection. We had already briefly dabbled in more serious themes in Edolas, but that becomes the norm and not the exception after the time skip. In many ways, it leads to a new style of storytelling for Mashima. But I gotta say, this run back through Fairy Tail's first half has been a really interesting one to me. There are 3 big lowlights for the series so far. The first is the growing trend towards weird, pervy panels. The second is that some ideas are presented which are very interesting, but they aren't explored deeply enough to really carry value. For example, all the philosophy in Edolas. And finally, there's also a growing trend of very coincidental solutions to problems. Coincidences can get you into a problem, but it becomes an issue when they're getting you out of them. And even just in these 3 arcs we talked about today, we have examples like, Mystigan showing up as a Lacrima is about to crash into Extalia and suddenly having a solution and sending the Lacrima back through an anima gate. Even though we hadn't seen him at all through the arc, we didn't know he was doing this. There's no build up to the solution just kind of shows up out of nowhere. These are pretty rare instances, but they are becoming more common than they had been at the start of the story. But aside from these issues, I have really enjoyed myself. I remember this being a much more flat and uninspired series, like, oh, it's Fairy Tail, the bare bones of shonen. If you took all the scraps of One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach and piled them up, you'd get Fairy Tail, right? But in actuality, I think that this series definitely has its own legs to stand on. I know that might sound silly, especially considering how successful the story is, but I think it's important to point out considering how Fairy Tail is presented in the anime community. While it's often a punching bag, the characters are fun, they're lovable, and they feel real in a way that many other series fail to achieve. Their successes feel like our successes, and their failures, their pain, and their fears feel like ours as well. I feel a connection to Natsu in a way that I do with other very important characters to me, like Luffy or Edward Elric. But in Fairy Tail, that feeling extends to almost every other member of the cast and not just a few select important characters. There's 30 or 40 relevant members of Fairy Tail, and I'd say a solid 2/3 of them are characters I can either feel a tie to or who I genuinely care about, and that is insane to think about. But Mashima does such a good job of making everyone matter. I mean, maybe not like Ritas or Max, but like anyone that he actually includes in the story has a layer of depth to them that I really appreciate. The story, while very split into its own unconnected sections for now, is a collection of parts that are interesting enough on their own to really hold value. Self-contained arcs like Daybreak are fun and quick, while others like Lullaby, Deliora, and the Tower of Heaven planted seeds for us to head into the second half and to explore Zeref's story, all while deeply exploring other characters and making the most of their magic and its themes. And man, some of the art is actually so gorgeous in this manga. I'm not saying the series is perfect by any means, and I'm not saying that it's perfectly written, or better than this, or better than that. What I'm saying is that this series isn't the joke that people make it out to be. There's a lot to love, a lot to connect with, and a lot to learn from. Sure, it can be kind of campy, and it might be kind of silly, but those rough edges are what make it so approachable. At the end of the day, opening a chapter of Fairy Tail feels like sitting down with some friends, and that's such a phenomenal gift for the manga to be able to give its audience. Anyways, I'm going to go start on part 3's script right now. Between part 1 and part 2, we're already over 200 pages. So believe me when I say these take a lot of effort. And like I said, leaving a like, subscribing, and supporting the channel through either Patreon or becoming a member would be monumentally appreciated. I truly love making long-form videos like these, but they are mountains of work. So any support that you can show makes a meaningful and massive difference. Thank you all for watching, especially if you've made it this far, and I hope you are all looking forward to part 3. For now though, please remember to stay excellent.